North Middlesex Regional School District School Committee for Monday, November 15th. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of open meeting law, we are meeting remotely, and the public was provided the URL to join the meeting in the meeting posting. As a reminder to the committee and audience members that this meeting is being recorded, and those that are not speaking, if you just remember to stay on mute to prevent background noise. So roll call, we have Dave.
Here.
Jess.
Here.
June.
Here.
Lisa.
Here.
Mike. I don't see. Randy.
Here.
Susan.
Here.
Tom.
Here.
And I am here. Next scheduled meeting of the North Middlesex Regional School Committee will be held at 7 p.m. on Monday, December 13th, 2021. First up is the consent agenda. We have approval of minutes, accounts payable warrants, payroll warrants, and a handful of donations. So I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
So this is for the consent agenda. Dave?
Yes.
Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Susan?
I think she stepped away for a moment, Craig.
All right, thank you, Robin. Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, so that is still unanimous, but 7. Did we have any public communications, Robin, this evening?
None.
None? All right. I guess as a reminder to the public, we welcome and encourage feedback from the public. You're encouraged to email the committee with any questions, comments, concerns in between meetings. And if you wish to address the committee, please email info@nmrsd.org. We ask that you do that no later than 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting, and provide the topic that you wish to speak about. We can't address things in the meeting that aren't on the agenda, so we can't have a back and forth. But again, highly encourage folks to send questions and comments so we can work together to get your questions or concerns addressed outside of these meetings. For new business, the first item is the actually, before we get to that, just so everyone's clear on the agenda, we do have the Collins Center joining at 7:30, and we expect that to be a lengthy discussion. So I do want to try to get through as much of the rest of the agenda as possible before 7:30. So if we start to get after 7 and there's something critical we haven't gotten to yet, please let me know, and we can certainly change the order if we need to. But right now we're 10 minutes ahead of schedule, so that's good. First item up is the October 1st enrollment report. Superintendent Morgan. You are muted, sir. Still can't hear you.
Double muted.
Double muted.
Yeah, and if you're using your phone, the phone's on mute, and then the Zoom's on mute. You've never been caught in a double mute.
More times than I can count.
I know.
Try to disconnect if you're using AirPods, disconnect them from the Bluetooth.
That's one way to get out of it, Brad.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can. Yes.
Okay. All right. So Just to go over the October 1 reports, and they did come in a little bit late this year. And just so the committee's aware, I compared this year's numbers to 2019 because last year's numbers really wouldn't have been all that accurate with the constant change in models. And I will share this with the committee along with my report following the meeting. But between 2019 and 2021, again, I left 2020 alone. Squanicook remained the same at 87 students. Ashby Elementary dropped from 165 to 139. Spalding increased by 20 students from 446 to 466. Varnum Brook also increased from 542 students to 561. So a good increase there. Hawthorne Brook and Nissitissit both decreased. So Hawthorne Brook went from 507 to 475. And Nissitissit went from 522 to 476. High school also decreased from 818 to 786. Keeping in mind that that our homeschool numbers are still pretty high, at just about 70 above where we normally are. So in looking at that, that would make up for many of the decreases, but overall district-wide right now, we're at 3,083 students, 3,083 in 2019, down to 2,990 present day. But again, keeping in mind that that does have a sizable number of homeschool students on it as well, which is higher than usual. We're just about 70 students more than usual in homeschool at this point in time. So I will share that report out with the committee. Again, I didn't see much value in comparing it to 2020 just because so much was up in the air and we had constant changing. And the October 1 report really wasn't all that accurate towards the end of the school year because we had students coming back into the district as well. So I went off our last somewhat normal school year, I would say. And in 2019, the October 1 count would have been relatively normal. So I can take any questions. Nancy Haynes, I don't know, or Nancy Milligan, if you want to add anything to that. It looks like no.
All right, any questions from the committee on that?
My hand raised.
Oh,
Yes.
You can barely see it on your light background, but yes, go ahead, Susan.
Oh, I didn't know. And my question was, the homeschool students, we may have covered this and I forgot. Are they concentrated at any particular grade level or is it fairly even across?
No, it's pretty consistent across the district.
Okay, thank you.
Are those, and I guess if we didn't compare to 2020, are those up, homeschools up this year compared to last year, or?
It's down compared to last year.
Okay.
But again, it's just about, I mean, you're looking at 93 students changing between 19 and 21 in total. And we still have just above 70 more than the average in homeschool. So that would make up for a lot of them. And the homeschool trend, I think, is going to continue until COVID is over or until parents feel more confident with the way that with sending their kids to school, whether it be they don't feel that they're safe or they don't want their kids masked. It really comes down to those two reasons. The parents are keeping their kids out, the extra parents that are keeping their kids out more so than normal. And I think that until that dies down and things pass, that we're likely going to have a higher number of kids that are being homeschooled for those two reasons.
Are we allowed to survey homeschool families to kind of gauge why they make that decision, or if there's anything the district can do to?
We could, but technically it's not within our purview. So parents might fill it out, or the homeschool association might send us a nice letter to say that that's not really part of your job.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, that's, I guess, a little disappointing, but I think it would be good to know the reasons, if there's anything that the district could be doing
I
differently.
can try, and I can just say it's voluntary.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if other committee members have an opinion, but I mean, for me, I think it'd be nice to try and just, again, even if two people write back and provide some reason that maybe we're not even aware of, it would just be good to know that.
You can get that out this week if the committee would like me to do so. That's easy.
Any objections to that from anybody?
I don't care either way. I mean, if administration feels like there's some value to that, then I'd say go ahead, but as a school committee member, I'm not going to ask for it.
All right, anything else on the enrollment report?
No, that is it.
Thank you. Next, we have the MCAS presentation, Ms. Milligan.
Sure. Ms. Michaud, would you present for me?
Yeah, Robin, you got to give me permission to present.
I didn't realize on the agenda I had only been given 10 minutes, so I'll take up this little extra time and I'll go fast at the same point.
So Lisa, you don't have, it's not allowing you?
We did practice today.
We did, that worked fine.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing. I know we were so smooth earlier.
Yep. Took us
I-
less than 10 seconds.
Maybe she's not a panelist.
She's a
She's
panelist. She is a
Okay.
I'm gonna make you a co-host so that you can do that, okay?
It's like a game show.
Okay, does it work now?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we'll jump right into the first slide. As you know, please remember this year that the tests were modified and that the students received different tests with different questions on the modified test within COVID. That could be that include being tested on different standards, the number or multiple choice questions and or opening responses that students received. Therefore, this year's test will be an outlier when looking at historical data in the future. To note, there will be no accountability ratings provided to districts this year. ELA and math had online the next gen test, while biology was still the legacy test. And as you can see in the slide deck, the number of sessions that were administered for each of the 3 tests. Finally, on our overview, it shows that most students did test in person. Next slide. Although the test was vastly different than other years, the test is still criterion reference and then based on the standards. Therefore, at the highest level of analysis, we look briefly at the district versus state levels. Next slide. There are some notable highlights for the district, which include in grades 3, 6, and 10 for ELA that the district improved compared to the 2019 scores, while the state decreased their proficient exceeding categories throughout the hybrid year. In math, while our NMRSD scores were down, we still outperformed the state in grades 3, 6, 8, and 10, where grade 10 outperformed the state by 9%. Math scores seem to trend down across many of the surrounding districts and our DART districts compared to 2019. The focus has been to look at the power standards that were identified for the state last year that we focused on with our students. It was reassuring that our students outperformed the state on 58% of the identified standards during our hybrid model, identified as the most important to know. Next slide. When looking at proficiency percentages for North Middlesex versus the state, you can see that overall for ELA, the district is at or above the state in every single grade level. We are still digging into the grade level data to determine what practices and curriculum resources have impacted these numbers. The next slide for math, we see 4 grade levels that statistically tie the state and 3 that exceed. We saw in grade 5 a discrepancy between the state and the district. Our assumption upon review is that this is connected all the way back to grade 4 in 2020, when we shut down in March and into the hybrid year, how that impacted the teaching of fractions. This is the type of analysis going on to see where prerequisites may be need of attention with teachers or interventions to keep moving with the grade level standards. For science, technology, and engineering tests, we see that our students outperform the state for total passing percentage. Next slide. Our next comparison provides you with this year's DART districts, many of the same from previous years. For ELA, North Middlesex outperformed 8 of the other districts while tying Sandwich. Next slide. For the 10 comparison DART districts in math, NM performed 5 of the districts in tying with East Longmeadow and Sandwich. NM was the only one who was only outperformed by 2 other districts. On slide 10, we see that ELA overall, in 5 of the 7 grade levels tested, ELA overall tied or outperformed in the state, 5 of the 7 grade levels that were tested. In math, in 110 of the 192 questions, or 58%, in the assessed power standards across the grades 3 through 8, outperformed the state. For science, we outperformed the state in grades 5 and 23, tied in 6 others of the 41 assessed questions, which is 70%. In science, grade 8, we tied in 24 of the 41 assessed questions, we tied in 6, but outperformed in the others, which is 73%. And in high school biology, we outperformed 42 of the 45 questions, or 93%. Sorry, that was a little bit jargony right there. On slide 11, what we started to do, and you've heard me talk about, is we're starting to triangulate data or layering the data between MCAS and other tests. So a goal for the district has been to locate and or create additional common assessments to be able to triangulate data. As MCAS is a snapshot in time, it is not the most useful data unless we can compare it to both ongoing diagnostic, formative, and summative assessments as well. The districts have been using iReady at the elementary level for 3 years and at the middle school level for 1 as a starting place for this data analysis. On slide 12, knowing that in our hybrid model, many of the students came in for 2 days of instruction per week with a longer break period, we knew that we'd be reducing the hours of instruction over the course of the year. Yet our diagnostic data was reassuring that many students progressed with all of the challenges that they faced. After analyzing with the iReady company, overall, this chart shows that 61% of our students made grade level progress, where 23% were slightly behind and 14% that would need additional supports for ELA. Knowing this test was not altered to any district instructional model, any students in the yellow area are still considered statistically progressing. According to the data, we can look at 84% of our students within an acceptable range for last year. On the next slide, our MCAS data show that NMRSD had traditionally met or exceeded the state in a number of students that had made proficiency on the state test. Now looking at the iReady diagnostic data, we can see that 41% of our students made typical growth, but 21% actually made them more than 1 year's progress within stretch growth. Therefore, although learning loss is a term that we put out there often, here we see that our data shows that many districts persevered through last year and continue to make exceptional progress with their teachers. On the next slide for math, 87% of the students are in expected range of progress for the hybrid year. This is all based on end of year for last year, and 13% in need of additional supports. Similar to our MCAS scores, with math being an area of concern, we continue to believe this validates the district's need for a new math program. On slide 15, for math, similar to our MCAS results, we see that the students are in need of more support, and we believe that the step 1 is through that guaranteed and variable curriculum with an updated curriculum purchase. On the next slide, so what are we focusing on? We're focusing on initial high-level analysis, has us focusing on the strengths, supports, and needs. For strengths and supports, we have strong scores across both platforms for literal comprehension of facts and details for ELA, a good grasp of word problems in math, And we've put in support such as district-wide PLCs by grade level, K-8, to support teachers having deeper conversations, something that we continued from COVID. Areas of review include looking systematically at the ELA materials purchased and implementation across K-8 classrooms for fidelity this year. We need to look more closely at how evidence is being used in supporting our ELA growth in writing. For math, we continue to look at the program pilots this year and collecting common data to analyze over time. We are also focusing on the pacing of math this year using effective acceleration strategies. On the next slide, for the middle schools, our overall MCAS scores were solid in most grades for ELA and math, with grade 5 being that outlier. We also want to highlight students with disabilities that had made substantial progress between the 2 and the 4-day models provided last year. We also want to look at how math and science continue to be areas of opportunity for improvement at the middle school level. Finally, on the next slide at the high school, we see that NM outperformed the state on all 3 tests, with ELA outperforming the state on all standards that were administered. We are also excited to say all students who took the ELA MCAS passed. For areas of need, the high school has similar goals for common assessments with data collection and the analysis as an area to grow. On this slide, our math scores were an area of priority in the legacy system and continue to be an area of concern with 2 years of data. Therefore, the district prioritized creating common assessments for each trimester and an online platform to review the implemented curriculum assessment results to determine systematic next steps. ELA scores are also not currently meeting targets across the board. Therefore, the district is implementing a research-based curriculum ranked nationally on EdReports. Science scores have showed steady improvement in both systems. Common assessments will continue to help monitor this progress between MCAS administrations. So does anyone have any questions? In your slide deck, you also have an appendices with other information that we've gone over in the past, but I just put it there for your FYI this year. Things such as the SGP highlights participation rate, the actual DART districts, the comparison charts, and a larger summary for ELA math and students with disabilities. Craig, do you want to call on different people?
Yep, yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
I think Susan, I saw your hand first, and then Tom will go to you.
I just, thanks, Nancy. That was helpful, and I enjoyed digesting that ahead of time. The charts with the horizontal, where it showed like students that were above grade level, on grade level, or below grade level from, green down to red.
Yeah.
In seeing that, it triggered a thought. Is there any benefit to allowing some self-pacing that would allow students that, I understand too that some students find certain topics quick to learn and other topics challenging to learn. I don't know how complex self-pacing is. It all sounds good when you hear it. Does that then allow the teacher to perhaps help on stuck things when a particular student is stuck on a particular thing? Different students, like I said, get stuck on different things, I would imagine. And
so I think that for overall, Susan, if I understand your question, I think self-pacing has a place within the intervention blocks. Lisa, if you want to take the presentation down, you can. So I do think self-pacing has a place there. I think that what we have to always remember is that we have to start with that guaranteed and viable curriculum. And for mathematics, we don't have something that all teachers are working with systematically, and the programs that we are currently drawing from on EdReports were scored not strong. So I think that the first thing that we need to do is make sure everyone has a curriculum that has been vetted against the state standards well and has scored well for student improvement, teacher use, and giving us the right data. Once you have a program in place, I think that looking at not necessarily self-pacing, but looking at fidelity to the standards within acknowledging students might be grouped differently is something I think that teachers always do. So I think that there's two sides of the house when you're thinking of areas which have a strong, solid curriculum in place. And then there are areas where you need a solid curriculum in place first before that you can start allowing students to go off. I think that have good data to start with is a place that we need across the district. And I don't think that is happening everywhere.
Okay, yeah.
And when I say
guess-
everywhere, I mean across all content areas.
Right. I guess what I was thinking was when I saw the red area, I'm like, oh, can we spend extra time and help catch those students up? And I'm like, oh, well, what are all the other students going to be doing?
And that's why we have the intervention blocks across K-8, and then we'll have that flex period at the high school being brought in. So that is definitely the time. So we also put in the 16 additional interventionists to the district that right from the start of the year had this end of year data. And that was our first meeting with the interventionists, is that we went through and we broke up all the data that we currently had to identify any student, and then the domains or standards that the different tests were telling us for data. And that's the nice part about triangulating your data, is that we didn't always have that MCAS data and the analysis done at the beginning of the year to get running right away. So it was easy for the interventionists to understand the students that they should be checking in with right away, and then be pulling into small groups.
I guess the other half of me is frustrated when there's certain kids or certain topics, or everyone's, what they're either the kid or the topic just needs to move on, but you have to wait for the topic or the student. And I don't want to leave any students behind. And there's probably 0 students exist that never get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, I'm not a teacher. I'm not trained. I'm not in the classroom. I don't get it. I just see things like Khan Academy. I'm like, oh, that's exciting. You master the topic and then you move to the next topic. And to have somebody there to help you when you get stuck or to challenge you is fantastic. But I maybe that's just not how, the learning environment that we're used to is structured and able to function, given all the requirements we have on us. And
And myself and the 2 directors talked often because we share an office. So you have your elementary teachers that, prep for at least 3 different, if not 4 different content areas each day with they have less students, but more content areas to prep for. And then you have your middle schools and your high schools that have a variety of different content areas that they might have to prep for depending on the level, but then they also have, could have 125 students. So I think that one thing that we always have to remember is our teachers are doing the best with what they have in front of them. And I know teachers intentionally leaving a student behind, nor are they not challenging a student. But as you're trying to balance everything that, especially this year coming out of COVID, we're still dealing with COVID, even though our students are in 5 days a week. But we're also dealing with not only the cognitive side of students, which is this presentation, but also the affective side of students. So whereas routines might have been established earlier in the year in previous years, our teachers are definitely grappling with giving students extra time to be successful in the classroom. So I think that there's a balance that we have to be aware of this year, that what the teachers are doing for our students. And it's trying to help stay within grade level material, which is that acceleration idea that we're not going to go back and remediate everything from a previous year, but to have additional interventionists to support students, that there's definitely areas that they are behind in to help gap fill what they can while meeting the needs of their students to move forward. All knowing that students, and I think we've seen it across the news, students are coming back in with the lack of structure that they might have had at home during COVID. They're coming back and they have a lot on their plates right now. And I think that the teachers are doing the best job they can. So I think that your concept of self-pacing, I think that there's a lot that we've tried to put into place with the intervention blocks, with more structure around the intervention blocks with more people to help out. But I think that the reality is some of these conversations we're going to have to table to get through the rest of this year and come back to.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And like I said, I don't appreciate what goes on day to day. And I think that our teachers are doing a great job. Not a criticism of them at all.
Sure.
Just a concept I've come across and curious what the roadblocks are in general across the education system, not just in our district, not just in a particular classroom, to doing that. And what are some of the downsides of even considering doing that, let alone the constraints and the roadblocks that we all work under. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
Tom, and then Dave.
Thanks, Greg. Nancy, thanks for putting all that together. I know you mentioned in the middle school level, kind of the grade 5 being the outlier. It was definitely a number that, when I looked through it, I kind of honed in on, and then it seems to go back up at 6th grade. And, for comparison's sake, it looks like the same thing in 2019, like kind of pre-pandemic, that there's this drop in 5th grade and then 6th. Like, I know it's a big transition year going to the middle school anyways, but I'm just wondering, like, what might account for the gap? Is there more that we need to do to kind of address that, or, kind of what do we account for that?
Yeah, and I think that historically, for the last few years when we've been looking at the math data, I think that the biggest piece, like you heard me said, is looking at a consistent program for our district. We're coming off Envisions as some of the resources and big ideas. Those two programs and the versions that we're using, if you look at them in Ed Reports, are not well rated at all for meeting students' needs. I think that our math teachers were doing an awesome job. We went through all the standards together since I arrived. We try to look at what we can do internally, but at the end of the day, I think that you have to have a solid curriculum in front of students. So we are piloting 3 math programs this year, looking to implement a new K-8 math program for next year. And then we're looking at whatever K-8 programs that we are in favor of, looking at to see if there's a 9-12 companion or supplemental curriculum that would work well. Based on the one of the 3 that we're currently vetting. And I think that's a starting place that's definitely needed. Again, you look at the curriculum, and then you look at the pedagogy, and last we look at the students, in the sense that we don't blame the students for what's happening. We follow their data, but if you have a good, solid curriculum in place and great teaching practices in place, then we can look at students that are struggling and look at the interventions from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Dave, and then Randy.
Thanks, Nancy, again for putting all this together. Could we look at slide 24?
Yeah. Lisa, you want to bring that up for me, please? Is it a iReady slide?
No.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Sure.
I'm sorry, slide 25, maybe. Perfect. Okay. So looking at that, that's so especially looking with regards to math, it seems like we've been on a downward trend for I don't know, 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
And I think you've kind of talked about that, about needing a consistent program. What, and I know that we've talked about it before too. The district kind of looking at those math numbers and saying, all right, those aren't as high as our ELA numbers. What programs have we been trying in that 4-year span? Have we made any changes to the programs during that time?
No. So our timeline was that, let me just work backwards. So we should have been implementing a new math program this year. We started the process of researching math programs when we went out the year of COVID in 2019-20. So in 2019-20, we came to the realization that we had to move on with a math program. We were going to implement an ELA program in 2021. 2021, because we had been piloting EL for 2 years. And then we were supposed to be enrolling on a math program. So with COVID hitting, we kicked that can. Everything got bumped up a year. So we didn't look into, we had in 2019-20, we had just started to bring in February different math programs. And that all got pushed to the wayside with COVID.
Yeah. Okay. And then secondly, I also want to look at, I don't know if there's a graph with special education numbers.
Nope, we didn't pull any specific special education numbers in this presentation.
Okay. Just kind of looking at the raw data from the DUSI website.
Mhm. Which I don't have in front of me.
Okay, I'll put it in the, no, sugar. I can't. Well, I'll email it to you.
Yeah, if you want to email it to me and if you want to have a conversation specifically.
Well, but what was I going to say though? So it looks like 18% of our special education students are passing with significant, well, I mean, what's that? 82% that aren't. So what are we doing to address that gap, right? Because if the district is coming in at 60% passing or 53% passing, but then our special education students are 35 percentage points or 40 percentage points behind, what are we doing to address that? I want to make sure that we're putting the resources that can help advance those numbers into place.
So Dave, I'd like to look at the numbers before I give you a more detailed answer because I don't want to speak out of turn. But the only thing that off the top of my head that I can say with certainty is that during interventions blocks and Patriot Time K-8, that is for all students. So that is not specifically just for students that do not have IEPs, or that would be for all students. So anyone that was identified would have opportunities to work with additional supports. But past that, I'd have to look into the numbers specifically to be able to give you a more detailed answer because I don't want to speak out of turn without having the information in front of me.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm just looking at it, and I'm, I've got all the, well, as much of the raw data as I can get. Obviously, there are certain subgroups that are blocked off, but
Are you looking at what are you specifically? Are you looking at a grade level? Are you looking at district?
So I've got it by grade level. I've got it by so grade level 3 English language arts, grade level 3 English or math, grade level 4, right? So I've got all the numbers in front of me. And seeing grade level 4, 19% of students with disabilities in English language arts passed. Grade level 4, 5% of students with disabilities passed math. So I want to make sure that we're putting the resources that are needed to help support these students, because comparatively, let's see here, grade level 4 math, 39% of all boys passed that one for 4th grade and 25% compared to 5% of students with disabilities. Okay. So, I just want to make sure that we're putting the resources that we have into helping boost those numbers, because 5% isn't really good enough.
Yeah, I will. I have it highlighted as to something to look into and get back to you.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, David. Randy?
There we go. Sorry. Wasn't on mute. Having a little problem. Thank you, Nancy. I really liked the presentation this year, especially with the comparative data to see along with the MCAS data. Said for years that one point of data doesn't tell the whole story, and it's nice to start to see some of that.
Yeah.
With that said, talking about looking into a new math program or going to implement a new ELA is it's a little concerning to me that we keep going from program to program to program. I still remember vetting the big ideas and whatever that one was. Have we, I mean, how much have we really looked into what's not working for our students with the current program so that we, don't just keep going every 6 to 8 years into a new program because, well, this one didn't work for our students? Is it the program that's failing? Is it that it's not working for our teachers? Are we not doing enough professional development for the teachers to be able to use the programs? Are we not giving the programs enough time? I don't know, how long to really wait, because having kids go through 3 or 4 different math programs in their K-12 existence isn't good either.
So I've been here for 8, and there's been no new math programs implemented since I've been here for 8 years. And one of the things that now, what we know in education is that companies did a really good job of selling their programs, telling everyone that you're going to get student outcomes. Ed Reports came out with the Common Core standards that had come out that started to independently rate programs against the criteria. So they would be rating against rigor and clarity and coherence for mathematics, both student outcomes and for teacher use. So that is one of the big game changers since I've been doing curriculum adoptions, is that we didn't have anything like that. Every company could sell you, kind of snow to an Eskimo. This looks wonderful. Here's every bell and whistle. But now that we have Ed Reports, that's our go-to to even start conversations about looking at a viable program. So that being said, once Envisions and Big Ideas were rated by Ed Reports, both confirmed what we knew was happening with our students, is that they weren't aligned to our standards. They weren't giving good student outcomes across the board, and that they weren't rigorous, coherent, or clarity to the way that the standards were implemented. So that being said, that was something that as we were looking at choosing a math program, there were criteria that we put in place with a committee that said one of the pieces that we had to look at was, what did Ed Reports say? It had to get all what we call green ratings, which means that it met all the standards. We only vetted out programs that were green and that also had a K-8 option, so that students weren't transitioning between a K-5 program and a 6-8 program like they were between Envisions and Big Ideas, because as you move from grade 5 to grade 6, you realize that there's a disconnect between the 2 programs. So some of the conversations that we had as a math committee that we talked for about 1.5 years before moving forward was that was one of the pieces. That was one of the pieces why we looked at a new ELA program. I did inherit the consultants when we worked in, but they were consultants. There was no program attached. They made a lot of the materials themselves, and they weren't rated, nor were they aligned to the standards in a way that was going to bring clarity, coherence, and rigor to the students. So I think that's going to be a game changer. And to your point, I know that I've spoken with the union about this because we all feel the same way. We can't keep changing every year a curriculum, but we have to start out with a better curriculum for our students. And this is one of the ways that we're going to do that, is having independent companies rating everything. Massachusetts is also a state that has their own internal rating system called Curate. Dr. Kevin Cormier is actually going to be joining us late tonight because he's actually on the Curate panel, running some work there. And what they did was they took the Ed Reports and then they actually did a second layer of investigation with just Massachusetts teachers to confirm whether or not they agreed with the Ed Reports. So that's another way that we are making sure that moving forward, that the curriculum that we do choose will probably have a lifeline that is longer than the ones in the past. That being said, there might not be another version. I know that even for our EL version, they've already, since the pandemic was in place, have swapped out some text that they think is going to be better suited to try to explain to students what's been happening in our world. So there'll always be updates, but we're hoping that we'll have updates and smaller revisions versus complete overhauls. So I agree with that. That's definitely not our goal.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on the MCAS results? All right. Well, Nancy, thank you very much for putting that together. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I have to thank my humanities coordinator, Lisa Camo, who's on the call, and also Kevin Cormier, who has also helped out with the presentation. So thank you both.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks, Kevin. All right. Next, and we've got, I'll say 15 minutes before we move over to the Collins Center stuff. So next up, we have the facility use donations in a request to approve 6 donations. And I think Mr. Fisk is on to speak to those. Or not?
Yes, I'm here. I wasn't
There you
sure
go.
if you needed me to speak on anything or not, but obviously some more coming in, and obviously with our last year we didn't have many groups looking for facility use, obviously. So this year the youth groups are definitely looking to ramp it up. So it's a lot of it is basically what we can expect annually from a lot of these groups. So we're working on trying to form these partnerships for the long term there. So I welcome any questions or, but looking for the school committee to approve these donations as part of their facility use contracts, which would waive the fee structure within policy KFE1, I believe, and get them the facility use that they're looking for.
Questions, Randy? I don't know if your hand is up from before or if you have a new question. No worries. I have a question, Cam, just on the, I guess just an explanation, because I don't know why we would do a donation versus just the charge for facility use. Like, what's the rationale? Is there a benefit to us or to the organization? Does that just give more flexibility? Again, just some background on that would be helpful for me.
Yeah, so it definitely gives flexibility to the group. I also think it's a win-win in my opinion. It's an investment from the group. In addition to, oh, hold on one second, I'm sorry. Very sorry about that. I've got a little one starving for my attention right now before bed.
No worries.
He's waiting on the stairs. So long story short, these contracts are with the groups, and basically it front loads, you know, this funds to the district. So instead of waiting for them to kind of tag on hourly rates after hourly rates through our facility use software, this kind of front loads it and gets us these these funds, and it's basically a commitment. If you think of, you know, everything from our turf debt to the upkeep of these facilities, we can kind of bank on knowing how much we're going to get from these particular groups annually as a means of a partnership. And it gives them access, you know, to the scheduling on my end. And it also, you know, offers them access to, you know, different rates. And it does help them out a little bit with the hourly rates in the long term, but it also, you know, they're looking for, I guess, considering the amount of hours they would prefer to use the facilities, the hourly rates don't necessarily line up with their budgets. So it's in that sense, it's a win-win where it gives us their commitment and you know, also those funds up front, if that makes sense. Did that answer it, Craig?
It does, Cam. Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else with questions? Otherwise, take a motion to approve the facility use donations as presented. It's $4,000 from the Townsend Ashby Pepperell basketball, $6,000 from the North Middlesex Youth Lacrosse Organization, $4,000 from Townsend Ashby Youth Soccer Association, $1,500 from the Pepperell Adult Men's Basketball, $750 from Pepperell Youth Soccer, and $250 turf donation from Mr. Gerald Morrill.
So moved.
Second.
Right, motion's been made and seconded. Any other questions, comments? All right, so Dave?
Yes.
Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So that is unanimous. Thank you. Next up, thank you, Cam, I appreciate it. Next, we have school cancellations versus remote learning. Is this Superintendent?
Yes, it is. So again, what we were actually supposed to get word from the state at this point 2 weeks ago is to whether or not school districts would be able to have blizzard bag / some type of remote learning in lieu of snow days, as has been allowed previously, then was taken away just prior to COVID. And we still do not have an answer from the state on this. I know that we have a calendar in place that talks about, making sure that we have permission from the state, but that the preference would be to have some type of remote activity or blizzard bag type instruction in lieu of having snow days. And, that's something obviously, there are parents that are very much in favor of it. There are parents that are not in favor of it. Certainly parents that have some child care issues, that eliminates those child care issues. And I would say the great majority of parents do have some child care issues. And then we have parents that want kids to have the ability to have a snow day, so to speak. All that being said, there's not, the deeper you go into June, to me, and I know that that others feel this way as well, just having conversations with some of the other administrators, it becomes less valuable. The kids being in school, it gets warm, it gets sunny, the weather's nice, kids are looking outside, they want to be outside. So really at this point in time, it may not even be our decision. The commissioner may come back and say that you have to make up all of your days. He may come back and say you have to do 5 snow days, and anything beyond 5 you can make up remotely. But we don't have any real direction from the commissioner, and we were supposed to get it prior to this week. We were supposed to get it the first week of November, and it has not been shared at this point. So I don't know how the committee feels about it. I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in on it, but we do have our calendar that outlines, how we intend to handle it if the commissioner allows us to have some decision making in the process. So again, just not sure how the committee feels about it at this point, but it may be a moot point after all, once he makes his decision.
Tom? And then Susan?
Just wondering, I know people are probably surveyed out, but just like, does it make sense to survey, our families and just get a sense of where they might fall on that? I know, like, even in my own household, I think my wife and I probably fall on opposite ends of this. She's at home with the kids and I'm not, so it's different.
Right. I know that one thing that we did get in the past from families was that families did, and I'm not sure if it was a survey or how we got this information, but families very much enjoyed knowing when the school year ended for sure. When there was a definite end to the school year, regardless of snow days. So there were definitely parents, a lot of parents who liked knowing when the school year was going to end. All that being said, an issue that I and all other superintendents face when it comes to calling snow days is that once you call a snow day, you create havoc for a lot of families, families where both parents have to work and then they have no place to put their kids, and then they're having to make a difficult decision. And that's usually, parents that struggle with decisions around snow days are struggling with it because of that reason. So to me, we can certainly send something out to the community. I have a pretty good idea on how it's going to shake out and how parents are going to feel about it. Just because childcare does tend to be the big piece where, you're giving parents, in most cases, a couple of hours notice prior to letting them know that their kids will not be going to school on that day and they have to make alternative plans. And that really is, that is the biggest issue for most families. But we can certainly send something out again. I would much rather wait until we have some word from the commissioner, so that I'm not sending out a survey that is meaningless in the end. And I think we could do it and get it turned around pretty quickly, once he does make that decision. And I hope that he's going to be doing that in the near future. I know that there was a board meeting scheduled for tomorrow, where I'm guessing this was going to be discussed, and it has been postponed. So I'm not sure when we're going to get the answer. But survey's possible, sure.
Susan, and then Randy.
I was trying to look at the calendar real quick because I didn't remember what we had printed on our calendar. It always seemed reasonable to me that we could call up to 5 days, and then after that, we're not calling days anymore. We're doing something different. So you kind of balance both of them. I'm not quite clear what the administration would recommend. It's just Susan and her thoughts, but I would love to see us vote and send the commissioner our opinion that we voted on. I'm tired of waiting around, but maybe that's just me being a pain in the neck. I mean, on one hand, I can see where going back to the COVID model of, okay, and everybody dial in and work with their teacher from their house could be really disruptive. Before, maybe you were borrowing a Google notebook. It seemed to be successful for us for a number of years to have the blizzard bag, for lack of a better word, but there was a plan for a project or an activity. I think it was even established at the beginning of the school year. I agree. I think in some way or another,
in effect for 1 year.
in some way or another, I think it's good to have the last day of the school year set. Not to go beyond a certain point. I personally think it's fine to, get your snow day, have the day off when it snows. It's part of being a kid. I don't have a strong inclination in any case, but I do think it's nice to have that last day set, no matter how we do it.
Thank you, Susan. Randy?
My question is just as far as the agreement that we have with the teachers union. I know at one point we had something with the remote. Would this fall under that? Is it still in place? Is it something that we need to consider when we're voting on this?
Well, again, I don't think there's anything, this is something the committee would vote on tonight, because I do think we need to get additional information from the commissioner, and that would also include, that would obviously include what type of educational model would be taking place if in fact students were not going to school and they were staying home, and snow days were going to be remote learning. Again, whether it be a blizzard bag type thing or whether it be live instruction. There will be guidance, I'm guessing, coming from the state. At this point in time, the only thing that the association has really had input in was a calendar, and it's on the calendar. It's just not. There's just no real model at this point in time. And I was hoping, well, we have had snow days previously in October and November, that we would have had some guidance at this point in time. So I'm hoping that that we'll be getting that guidance at some point in time towards the end of this week.
Any other, Susan, is your hand back up, or?
Oh, I didn't take it down, but
Okay.
yeah, I think it is nice to have a game plan in advance, so we're not scrambling at the last minute. Oh no, we're sending the kids to Saturday school. Oh no, we're canceling April break. Like, it's certainly nice to have a plan that's workable, no matter what's thrown at us.
So does somebody want to make a motion contingent on commissioner's decision?
I'd like to motion it if I understood what the administration thought was the best. And maybe they said that and I missed it, because I didn't catch that.
So again, I would not recommend making a motion, because we don't know what the model is going to be for the education. So if we do the 5 snow days and then everything after that is remote, we need to get guidance from the state and then have some discussions around what that is going to look like if we are going to have some snow days that are going to be remote learning, so to speak. So I do think it's premature to vote on it at this point because we have no guidance. And if we vote on it and guidance comes out and we're unable, I think that we're going to have some conversation. I just think it's premature. I think we have to have some conversations.
So the state has 5 snow days to figure it out, don't they?
There you go. All right. If there's nothing else on that, we'll move on to the subcommittee reports real quick. It's just after 7:30. So unless there's anything urgent from Accelerated Repair, Building Committee, Finance, or Negotiation and Personnel, then we will jump down to policy. And Randy, I think you got 3 out, wanting to go out for, or 2 to go out and 1 to rescind.
Yes. So we have 2 for a first reading. The first one is IHBG-R homeschooling. This one was updated with Nancy Milligan just to reflect the practices that we have updated for language. We're no longer, your email wasn't really in the old policy. We do a lot by email these days. So it really is just an update to what we do. And then policy AA is school district legal status. On this one, it was a minor change. We wanted to add in the regional agreement for legal references. That was the only change for that one. So since those are both for a first reading, I will move that we approve IHBG-R and AA for a first reading.
Second.
Randy and then Lisa. Any questions for Randy? All right, seeing none. So this is for policy IHBG-R and policy AA for first reading. So Dave?
Yes.
Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Real quick, Randy, I don't know if you know, or maybe Robin, if we could just give a quick 30-second on where the public can find these policies to provide input and how they should be providing input on these.
So probably tomorrow, they'll be added to the bulletin board on our website. The policies will be listed there. And where they're listed, it tells them everything that they need to do if they have any feedback for us.
Okay.
All the contact information is on there.
And that is that bulletin board on the homepage? On
It's-
just
Yep.
NMRSD.org. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. All right, Randy, next.
And the next policy is policy ABA, commitment to accomplishment. These policy subcommittee is recommending that we rescind this policy. Reading it again, this is part of our 5-year review. We're looking at this, and it really doesn't say a whole lot. It is kind of a feel-good policy. Didn't have a lot of good information, kind of confusing on what it was trying to say. And so at this time, we'd like to recommend that we rescind it. So I will make a motion to rescind policy ABA.
Second.
So any questions on this one? And Randy, is there a planned update to this, or is this just obsolete at this point?
At this point, obsolete. We'll take a look. Again, it really didn't say anything, that would need to, that isn't anywhere else, that it was a very confusing policy.
Right. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, this is to rescind policy ABA, and this would take effect immediately. Dave?
Yes.
Jess?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So policy ABA is out to pasture. Anything else, Randy? All right, thank you. Any other business before we go to the Collins Center? Is there anything else anybody needed to address this evening? All right, so we will spend the rest of our time on Collins Center survey and public engagement sessions report and a discussion with the school committee on where they're at so far. So Superintendent, I'll turn it over to you for any introductions that we need.
Sure. So I'm not totally sure who is here from the Collins Center other than Michael Edwards. So Michael Edwards is the person I've been working with on a regular basis. He has been working with other officials within the school district as well. So I'll turn it over to Michael. I think he should be able to speak at this point so that he can introduce the rest of his team. Michael, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, and I've got a few additional people joining me, and I'll introduce them as soon as I see everybody pop up here. But thank you, Brad, for having us. Thank you, committee. Looking forward to having a good discussion with you. Nancy, I know we've talked to you a number of times in the past, and I hope I'm not missing anybody, but I'm Mike Edwards with the Collins Center, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen, which I think I can do like this, and let's see. Everybody see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
See if I can get the rest of my screen back up and running. Okay, so we've got a pretty good amount of information to present to you guys. I'm sure everybody here is at least somewhat aware of the project we've been doing, that we were engaged really through the town of Pepperell, but working directly for the district and trying to help you guys come up with some good alternatives for some cost containment alternatives in the future. I know, Brad, you did an enrollment presentation earlier in the agenda. We had another meeting. I was a little bit late getting off, but I wasn't sure how deep you got into that, but we'll be talking about more of the historical trends and the projections. So hopefully this isn't too repetitive of what you've covered before. So let's see if this is advancing.
Michael, can you hear me?
I can.
Just so you're aware, I just did the October 1 report and compared it
Perfect.
to 2019.
Okay, well, then we're going back. We'll cover the rest of the decade when we get to a little bit further information down. So just for anybody who doesn't know about the Collins Center, we are we're a center within UMass Boston, but we are a state agency that was created in 2008, really with the primary mission to help local governments, school districts, and state agencies work better. So we're a technical assistance group. We've done projects really across New England, but more than 700 here in Massachusetts with most of the municipalities. And I think almost every town in the district. I don't know that we've done one for Ashby in the past, but we've certainly worked with Townsend and Pepperell. But we do really a little bit of everything, and we have a number of practice areas that we focus on, one of which is within school operations. We do a lot of operational reviews and quite a few executive recruitments. And part of my team that I have here today, I basically work as the project manager for this. But I've got some fantastic team members that you'll be hearing from today. Number one, Ed Gotthard. Ed has, in 45 years in education in Massachusetts, basically done everything, Ed, except I think lunch lady. You probably haven't done any serving of sloppy joes or anything like that, but everything from superintendent to being in the classroom. We've also got Heather Michaud. She is one of the newer members of the center, but she comes to us with a little over 10 years of experience in school operations and business management for schools. And then our data guru, Shelley Ervais, and she's going to be really talking to you about the public engagement and the survey data, as that was the aspect of the project that she was heading up for us. So basically, when we started this, Brad had reached out and shared some concerns about some facility issues and really a striking increase in your cost per student over the years. And so we wanted to take as deep of a dive as we could into that. And that's really what we're looking at, is what are opportunities we have for cost containment. And given some of the things that we've uncovered in our data, we're taking almost a facility-centered view of that. We've identified some capacity issues. Obviously, you're aware that you've got some decisions to make on some different facility projects that have been identified. So we're trying to take this as an opportunity really to use the data to ground a discussion in the data and the facts before you decide where you're going to make your investments. Ultimately, what we are presenting are simply alternatives. We won't be making recommendations. That's for you as a body to decide upon the direction that you want the district to go. So that's how you will receive our ultimate report, is a series of alternatives, pros, cons, and costs associated with those, all grounded primarily in data. One big piece that we do that gets a little bit outside the hard facts is the public engagement. And that's what we'll be spending a good chunk of our time tonight talking about, is the survey that we rolled out that had just under 1,000 participants and 2 sparsely attended public engagement sessions, but ones that we think were productive and gave us some good information. When Shelley finishes presenting that information, I will go over the data that we presented to the public engagement groups, as well as some additional data, and show you guys some trends. And Ed and I will cover some different information in that, and that will be followed by a discussion where you as the committee will be giving us some input. So Heather will be leading a discussion, a facilitated discussion at the end of this. And then we'll talk about next steps for our project. But I think, like Brad has mentioned in the past, what we're presenting right now is one of the early steps that we have in this project. And that is basically our baseline data and the results of the public engagement information. So we will follow this up with a draft report much later in the process, and then ultimately the final report after you've had opportunity for review and comment. But I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the next steps. If nobody has any immediate questions for me or on the center, our role, or the project, I'll turn it over to Shelley.
Michael?
Sure.
This is Susan Robbins. You hit on it a little bit, but just to make sure that we are in the same point in the milestones, that we're all on the same page with that. I think in digging into the agreement, there's like a 7-step process.
Yep.
And I think this is step 5. I didn't know if you could kind of recap for the listeners kind of real quick. You mentioned a little bit about next steps, but
Sure.
kind of along that line, because I know that I was thinking that tonight was something different, and I'm pleased to hear where we are tonight, because I was thinking it was further along. So
No, we didn't want to get further along until we had a chance to talk to you. But up until this point, basically we have, and Brad, you'll have to correct me if I've got the initial date wrong, but we started, I think, in earnest around January. Does that sound about right? It was right after the kind of the end of the year. And obviously it's been a little bit of a nutty year. So when we put the schedule together originally, we built a considerable amount of slack in there because we had no idea what COVID was going to do, and in particular, what it was going to do to availability of people to participate and to work on things. We're about a month behind overall. We initially planned to have this discussion way back when we started it in October of this year. But up to this point, we've had our on-site facility visits where we've basically done some auditing of the buildings, a pretty thorough review with our facilities guy, and then spent a lot of time with Oscar going over the buildings, looking at the needs and really the building's ability to handle different type of programming and capacities. We have done all of our initial cost analysis, and that's really kind of a dissection of the district's data and then reconciling all that with what DESE has. And then we've obviously done all of the enrollment modeling for the projections moving forward, which I'm going to present a very small amount of that tonight because we want to update them now that we have the October 1 numbers. So we're hoping we get those certified by DESE, but Brad, I'm not sure exactly when they've released the date for that. I know it's coming up in the next month or so that they're going to be releasing. But the other big piece that we've done a lot of is looking at population trends, just to try and get an idea where the district is going. Within that, we've worked individually with the towns to get permit and economic development data just to better inform our enrollment projections, but also really put kind of put this discussion in context of where these three towns are, what the trends have done, and where they're heading. That's actually, I think you'll see when we get a little further along, the demographic aspect of this is really striking when you look at the population trends and how that fuels the discussion of where this district and its facilities that serve it need to go. So basically, we're at the point we call the baseline data. So we know everything that's happened up till now. And now we'll take that information, use that to inform some projections so that we have really, if nothing else changed and all the trends continued, this is where it goes. So that we'll be able to use to compare with the next step, which is developing all the alternatives. And I think ultimately, I think in the proposal we had, 3 or 4 different scenarios that we would look at that are realistic, that, not getting completely off the wall with things. And then we'll have all of those to compare with. Had nothing changed, this is where things would be. So I think, and I've got it written down in a later slide, we're looking at the draft report sometime in February and the final report in May. So the whole goal was that you guys would have this information in time for the next budget cycle, which is really when the decisions are probably going to have to be made about what you need to do.
So is it fair to like super recap, just to say you've collected a lot of data, you're
Yep.
sharing with us tonight what you've collected,
A piece of it.
Okay. And then your final step of this initial data collection is to get the school committee's input.
Yep.
And then you're going to go from here, develop alternatives, and then share with us a draft. And then you're going to put together a final report.
Yes, based on your review and comment on the draft.
Okay.
And yeah, then we'll have a final report. And like I said, it won't be recommendations. It will be data to help you guys make your decisions.
Right. Some alternatives to consider.
Yes.
Okay, so you're collected data, you're presenting some of that, you're going to collect data from us, you're going to create alternatives in draft, and then you're going to create alternatives in final.
That's a much shorter recap than I just gave. So yeah, that's good. I'm gonna let you summarize my stuff from now on, because that was much more concise.
No problem.
Any other questions on us and the process? All right, well, I'm going to turn it over to Shelley, and we haven't quite figured out the act of handing the clicker over to somebody. So Shelley, just tell me next slide when you're ready.
Will do. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Okay, so I'm gonna speak about how we were able to engage the community and get some of their feedback and really learn more about their priorities and educational, what they think about the district and their educational values, so that we could have that going into, to mix in with all of this other data. So there were two different types of opportunities for the community to participate and give their feedback and, talk about their opinions. The first was to participate in a community engagement session. So we had 2 engagement sessions in mid-October, and they were about 2 hours each. We had 28 participants. We had initially almost 50 people get back to us saying that, hey, we'd be interested. At the end of the day, there were almost 30 that participated in either of the 2. All towns were equally represented. So we did ask, a little demographic information. And Ashby Elementary, so participants who have some stronger relationship with Ashby Elementary, mostly, a parent or guardian of a student at Ashby, or a resident of Ashby, were overrepresented compared to the other elementary schools. And then we also, so because of the sort of limited number during the community engagement sessions, that data is more anecdotal. But it's interesting, and a lot of it sort of does line up with what we heard in the survey. So let's move on to the survey, which was the second opportunity for residents to get involved. So we opened up a survey, monkey survey, towards the beginning of October, and it ran for almost the entire month. It took about 9 minutes to complete. There were 20 some odd questions. We got almost 1,000 participants. So we got almost 1,000 respondents. About 56% identify with a perspective as a sort of a school age family, I'll say. So that is a parent or guardian of a child who's either in the district, school age, but out of district, or future parent. And then we had, again, Ashby was a little bit overrepresented in terms of respondents. And again, it was administered via SurveyMonkey, so we were able to tabulate all the data, play around with it, and I'll share that with you this evening. And that's more, statistical, because we do have a greater number of respondents. So I'll start with the community engagement sessions, just talking a little bit about what the sessions were all about, what happened. So first, we had a couple of just pop-up questions to understand where people were from. And then we shared a bunch of data, that some of which Mike will share with you later. And it's just to share the facts with the participants. So we looked at population trends and projections, enrollment trends and projections. We looked at the facility usage, how much excess capacity there might be. And then we shared some, financial figures, looking at trends in cost per pupil, as well as assessments for Hawthorne Brook and Ashby Elementary. And then we broke it down, and we wanted to hear from our participants. So the first question we asked the group is, what stood out regarding the data that they were just presented? And then after we got just some general comments, we broke each evening's group down into smaller groups and asked them to talk about certain attributes, educational attributes, district attributes, and what they meant to them. For example, academic excellence. We say, what does academic excellence mean to you? What is that? And then after that, we asked respondents to individually via a poll rank the importance of the different attributes. So we kind of hear, after they thought about what these attributes are, well, what's really important in the school district and what's maybe less important, again, to them as individuals. And then lastly, we had a brainstorm with the group and said, how do we build, what does a school district look like that's a district that families want to move into those communities for? So that was just sort of a brainstorm on how do we maybe make the district stronger. So moving on to the next slide, the overall sentiments. I call these sentiments, again, because this is kind of anecdotal information. We had about 14 participants for each group. So we cannot say, this is statistically significant, or, this is just really what we heard. Interesting thing, a lot of it does line up with what we saw in the survey. And again, the survey was about 1,000 respondents. So, there is some weight to this. So I'll start on the first point. Academic excellence and a sense of community ranked most important among, the different sort of school attribute values that we offered up. So those two really were the strongest. The importance of having, what people would call great schools was more important than concerned about raising taxes and even convenience sometimes. So an excellent district was more important than maybe keeping costs at whatever. Great schools attract new families to the district. So there's definitely a feeling of, if we have a great school district, our population is going to grow. People are going to want to move into the district, and the opposite is also true. And then when they talked about academics, they said academics are important, but that's not all a great district is about. It's not just the math and the science and the English. It's about the arts, the music, the language, the extracurricular programming. That's all, the special ed, that's all involved in having a great district. And then neighborhood schools build a sense of community, a sense of school pride, and both are hugely important. And then there were a couple of concerns. Definitely the participants were concerned about the prospect of Ashby Elementary closing and the impacts that it would have. And among those that they shared, loss of staff jobs, longer bus routes, so longer transportation for young students. Again, back to the, new families will be attracted to a great school district, a drop in real estate values, perhaps if the perspective of, potential families that move in is that the district is not going in the right direction. They're concerned about a lost sense of community if they lose a local elementary school, and then potentially overwhelming other districts if there's an influx of students from Ashby Elementary. Are the other schools going to be able to handle, for example, the special ed students that will be coming in? And then the Second kind of, concern that was voiced is, administrative transparency and consistency and support for schools and teachers is critical. And there is some perception among those 20 participants that is lacking at some points. And the examples they gave were shifting priorities if the administration changes, and potentially a lack of public engagement in decision-making. So, maybe feeling like their voices aren't being heard in the decision-making that's taking place. So those were the overall sentiments. There's one pop-up poll I did want to share with you, and this was one we asked after the participants talked about what attributes were important to them consistently in both groups. And you could see Wednesday and Thursday's groups. When we asked, please select the 2 attributes most important to you, academic excellence and sense of community rang strong. And then when we asked the reverse, please select the 2 attributes least important, it's kind of a little bit all over the map, except cost to taxpayers was, highlighted among most respondents as least important. Again, it's a select group of participants, 28 people. So, anecdotal, but still interesting. So moving along to the survey. Again, I'll go through the types of questions we asked, then I'll go through an overall summary of findings, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into the data, and I'll show you, slides on a lot of the questions that we asked so you can really, see some detail. So the survey, as I mentioned, took about 9 minutes. There were 20 some odd questions. First, we asked demographic information, what town do you live in? Age range, and your relationship to the district. So basically that was, are you answering, these questions as a parent or guardian of an enrolled student, as a parent or guardian of a future enrolled student, as a concerned resident, as a teacher, basically just giving, out of town. We asked their level of satisfaction with the current offerings in terms of programs, activities, facilities, the importance of, again, attributes, school district attributes. So it's a little bit similar to what we asked in the community engagement sessions. And then attitudes on spending. So attitudes on capital spending throughout the district, within their own towns. We asked specifically for among Ashby residents who responded their attitude towards raising taxes to fix Ashby, and perceived anticipated impact on their children, on their families, if Ashby were to close. So now we'll hop into the overall summary. All right, so I've got 2 pages of findings. We've got about 6 bullet points here. The product is more important than the package. Now, what that means is when we asked respondents about, what's really important to them, academics were important to them, extracurricular, there were a bunch of things that they spoke to that were important, but really it was what happens inside the buildings. It's what's offered to the students that's more important than what the buildings look like. When they were asked questions about, is it important to have up-to-date modern facilities? Yeah, maybe you had 60% of the people that said yes, but you had 80 or 90 saying that these other things were important. So it's more important that the programming is there than the buildings are beautiful. High school respondents with high school students were a little more likely to say, hey, we want things a little more up to date. I think that makes sense, maybe just having to do with what takes place in a high school and maybe the importance of up-to-date technology, STEM, all that. Okay, second point, for younger students, respondents feel that having an in-town school is very important. Over 75% of respondents cited the importance of having a preschool and an elementary school within their town. Also, although to a lesser extent, respondents did say that they like to have the grade 5 in their town, whereas grade 6, it was less, it was less strong, that feeling. Third point, respondents are opposed to increasing travel time for young students. So, and among Ashby resident respondents, that opposition was the greatest. Okay, so next slide. Okay, great. So respondents were in support of generating revenue by opening schools to alternate programming. So basically, when we asked, hey, some communities raise money for the district. They raise revenues by allowing the schools to be leased by other organizations or groups that can run programs out of those schools. Are you open to this? Yeah, a majority said that they are. They were open to pretty much all of the alternatives that we gave, whether it was recreational programs or daycares or special education programs or intergenerational. They were least in favor, although still a little bit above the majority, or a little bit above 50%, of having a use that benefited out of district residents as opposed to in-district residents. Okay, next point. There was support for funding. So we found that a majority of respondents overall, as well as just, breaking out the group of parents and guardians, support district-wide capital spending. It was about 60%. And then among Ashby respondents, so residents from Ashby who responded to the survey, about 60% said that they would be willing to pay higher taxes to revitalize the elementary school. Again, we asked Ashby respondents how they felt about the possibility of closing Ashby. Strong opposition. So 72% strongly opposed, another 12% opposed. And their concerns, again, some of them mirrored what we heard in community engagement. They were concerned with the additional travel time, a lost sense of community, a declining local economy, and then social and emotional impact on the students. So now we'll dive a little deeper into the data. First, we'll talk about who responded. So as I mentioned, about 56% of respondents most strongly identify with the perspective of being a parent or guardian of a current or future school-age child. And you could see on the left, the table where we have the relationship with the district, and you see the first row, parent or guardian of a district attendee. We see 50% of respondents, and then it goes, down from there. So the 56% is made up of current parent or guardians of district attendees, parent or guardian of a future attendee, which was 4%, and then parent or guardian of an out-of-district or homeschool child, another 2%. If we move to the right and we look at what towns our respondents come from, we see that Ashby, by far had the most respondents. So I think it was close to 40% of respondents were from the town of Ashby. And then in terms of the ages, about 2/3 were between the ages of 35 and 54. So, folks that are probably most likely to, have kids in the district or, maybe who've just left the district. So next we'll look at the schools that respondents' children are going to. So we asked folks who said that they do have a child or children enrolled in the district. We asked them where they're enrolled. So we could see, if we look at the table on the left, that there was a good representation among all the different I'll call school levels, elementary, middle, and high. The way that you read this table is we'll take the first row where you see the number 14. And what that's saying is that there were 14 respondents who have a child or one or more children in preschool as well as elementary. The next row, only one respondent had preschool, elementary, and middle. And then we'll look at the 136. Okay, what that's saying is that 136 respondents had only elementary school students. So that's how you read that table. But you can see going down, we definitely have the most in terms of elementary, but then middle and high are also fairly well represented. And then on the right, you can see the pie chart shows the percent of respondents with who have children in the district where their kids are enrolled. So we see Ashby, 18% of respondents, a little higher than Spalding Memorial and Varnum Brook. The high school, 23%, Hawthorne Brook, 19%, Nissitissit 12%, and Squannacook 4%. So how satisfied are respondents with the current facilities? So we asked this among, among people who had, or we looked at the data, I should say, among those who actually have students within the buildings. So they could maybe give a more accurate assessment of what they think. And you could see that it varies. With the high school, looking at that bar all the way to the right, 89% of respondents who have high school students are satisfied or very satisfied with the facility. Nissitissit also pretty high at 86, Squannacook. But then we see it decline a little bit for Spalding Memorial at 73, Varnum Brook at 69, Ashby at 64%, and then Hawthorne Brook at 59%. Next, again, getting back to how important are certain district attributes. We broke the data down. Well, we asked about all of these different attributes that you'll see on the left side of the table. So student-teacher ratios, instructional technology, advanced classes. These are in the order of respondents who said that these are important or very important. So that's how they're ranked here. But we broke the data down looking at respondents who have only an elementary school student, which is the ES, only a middle school student, MS, only a high school student, then total among all the enrolled families, and then the grand total among all respondents, regardless of whether they have children in the district or not. We broke the data down that way just so it wouldn't get muddied. So if we were looking at a respondent that has elementary and high school, well, gosh, if they're saying ratios, is that for elementary school, is that for high school? So that's kind of the reasoning as to how we broke this data down. But what we saw is that really those factors associated with more like that quality, education are ranked right at the top. So, student-teacher ratios, instructional technology, advanced classes and academics. But then right behind it, you see the music and the arts, and that almost goes back to the community engagement sessions where folks said, hey, a great school, they might do well on the tests, but they also have the music and they also have the art and they also have all of these, additional types of programming. Special ed ranked high. A couple other points on this: minimizing travel time is more important for younger students. So not a surprise. And we see that down travel times right there around in the middle. So for elementary schools, respondents with elementary school students, 81% said that minimizing travel time is important versus 65% of high school parent or guardians of high school students. A couple other things, extended day programming. So that's going to be the second from the bottom, which makes sense because, parents and guardians of high school students probably less likely, and middle school students less likely to need the extended day programming, but almost 50% of respondents with only elementary school students. So really parsing out the importance of that at the elementary level, 47%. So that was interesting, at least when I took a look at this data. And then cost, looking at that, it came in last. So basically what we meant by cost is, I guess maybe sacrificing some type of, cost as being the most important thing. We want to really minimize that cost. Okay, moving on, the importance of modern facilities. And I hit on this earlier, that in and of itself, having the modern facility isn't as important. It's what takes place inside the facility. So among all respondents, which is that first blue bar, 61% said that having a modern, up-to-date, and facility in excellent condition is important, or very important. And that number doesn't vary much looking at the red bar next to it, which is those respondents with students or future students in the district. Willingness to travel. So we asked this question: indicate your level of agreement with, I would be willing to have my child or children travel a greater distance to school for. So there were 3 different things we asked them: for a better facility, more opportunity in terms of extracurriculars or clubs, or greater social opportunities. And what we saw among the elementary school parents, and that's going to be the first blue bar, about 25% would be willing to travel to for a better facility. A little bit lower for extracurriculars. As far as social, not really interested at all. So definitely a far minority willing to have their children travel farther. And then if you look at Ashby, go back. If you look at that low bar, that's among Ashby respondents. So, all right, so moving on. The importance of having a hometown school by grade. So we asked respondents again, how important is having the school that their child or children attends located within their hometown at various levels? So Preschool, we'll start with the bars on the left. And we asked this, or we broke the data down 2 ways, looking at that parent and guardian group, and then looking among all respondents. So the light blue is the parent guardian group, and then the darker blue are all respondents. So they're not terribly different, but when we look at the preschool, which I thought was interesting, over 75% of parents or guardians, of school-age children say that having a preschool in their hometown is important or very important. And then when we hop two bars over to elementary, over 80% respond that having an elementary school in their hometown is important or very important. And then, it goes down as the grades, as the kids get older. Similarly, we asked about the importance of having facilities in their town. So, we asked about a hometown school, didn't specify what school, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school or preschool. But then we also asked about playgrounds and athletic fields, sort of the other things that sometimes go along with the schools. And you could see that all of these things are important. It didn't drop off. It wasn't like the school's really important, but whatever on the playground or whatever on the athletic fields, they like to have these local facilities available as well as the school. Okay, this is talking about the alternate use of facilities, which I mentioned in our summary points, that the majority of respondents say, hey, yeah, if we could get more revenue using our current school facilities for other uses when it's not interfering with our student safety, with their security, with their needs, go for it. And you could see that 80%, for example, of respondents support or strongly support town recreational usage of the facilities. 75% would support a daycare. 74 adult community education, so there's pretty strong support. And at the bottom, still, over 50%, but the non-town recreation was just a little bit lower. I think speaking to the fact that, hey, it'd be great if this could benefit our district residents. Okay, now we get into the money. So ask them, would you support capital spending for, district improvements? We asked four questions on this. First, we asked respondents, would they support all capital projects in the district? Would they support capital projects only in their town? Would they support capital projects only in the schools that their children will be going to? Or is there just no support? Would they not support any capital projects? So what we saw is that among all respondents, which is the second to the left bar, it's the red bar in all of these different groups of bars, that's all respondents. The first one is that parent or future parent group. 60%, a little over 60%, agree or strongly agree with supporting all capital improvement projects throughout the entire district. And these groups of bars, you see they go down and down. What that's saying is that most of the folks who support capital district spending, they support it throughout the district rather than I only support it in my town or I only support it for my kid's school. So it's almost this feeling of, hey, we're one district and I support spending in our district as opposed to just in my town. And then those last set of bars that are pretty low is the I don't support any capital spending in the district. Okay, so then we thought, well, gosh, I wonder how this question, how it would break down if we looked at folks who have been in the district for a long time, folks that are new to the district. Does the feeling for capital spending change? Is there less support, more support? And we saw no, it's pretty stable across the board. So the way that you would read this table is on the bottom of each bar, you see to the left, folks respondents who have been in the district for less than a year, 1 to 3 years, 4 to 10 years, and on, moving to the right, being in the district longer. These blue squares, that's just the number of respondents in each group. So for example, if you look at the grand total to the right, you see we had about 600, a little more than 600 respondents. About half of them have been in the district for over 20 years. You could see about 300 there. And when you look at the stacked columns, the blue represents the percent of respondents that strongly agree with spending district-wide, and the red is agree. So you see, aside from this like less than 1 year, which is a real small number of respondents, that it hovers right around that 60% mark for, almost all of the different groups. So it really isn't a question of, well, I've been here for a long time, I don't support it, or I do support it. It's pretty universal. All right, then we got to Ashby, and we asked among those respondents from Ashby how they feel about, the possibility of losing their elementary school. And, this pie chart tells, tells the story. 72% strongly oppose closing Ashby Elementary, with another 12% opposed. And then we'll get into the reasons why. We then offered an open-ended question saying, well, explain to us, explain your answer. And going through those 229 responses that, we had, the things that, what we saw the most, travel time, like the greatest concerns, the greatest opposition was for increased travel time. Safety of being on the bus, to a lesser extent, we did see it, but it wasn't, a recurring theme. It was really the travel time. And then community character, community pride, and the closest, not just for the kids, but for the entire household, for forming those family friendships, that kind of thing. Town desirability, and that again speaks to are people going to want to move into a town that has no elementary school? And then fairness. So comments such as, we pay into the district and we want a physical presence in the district, in our town. To a lesser extent, we saw crowding, the perception that if the population grows, will the schools then be crowded? If we lose one of our schools, will the class sizes be too large? And then a perceived cost increase with a closure. Again, it's a perceived increase. Those in favor, we had 19 whopping responses for in favor. They cited, again, perceived cost advantages if you close Ashby, and then better opportunities for students. So then we asked specifically among Ashby Elementary families, or those who will have students in Ashby Elementary, what the particular impact would be, on their families. And then we said, hey, what do you feel about it? How do you think this would impact your household finances, household logistics, students' academic achievement, students' social well-being, household social well-being, students' emotional health? So we looked at this among just those parents, and then all Ashby residents. And you could see here, most of all of the things that we asked, they thought that the impact would be hugely negative. 83% of parents talk about the negative impact to students' social well-being, another 80% students' emotional health, 74% household social well-being, household logistics, 81%. Again, these are perceived, but that's what we're seeing. And then would they support, would they accept a increase in taxes to fix Ashby Elementary? And a majority would. That holds true for almost all age breakdowns. 58% of Ashby respondents expressed support for raising taxes to fix the school. And the support, is obviously a little bit greater among that parent and future parent group. And then, yeah, just looking at among the ages, we see that it's not necessarily a case where you have just those, those sort of parent, the 35 to 44, the 45 to 54 supporting it, and then a total drop off. We're not seeing that. So all of this data from the survey is going to be made available to be sent to Brad, and then it'll be disseminated from there.
Thank you, Shelley. Before we move on, we might be able to take just a few brief questions if anybody has any questions on the survey information. But I think in the interest of time, we'd like to try and limit those. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask Shelley before we move on?
Susan, you got your hand up?
Yes. Perhaps I didn't catch something earlier, but I was struck by the amount of information particular to Ashby. What was driving that?
We actually made a conscious decision to ask that hard question about Ashby. I think anybody who came in from the outside and looked at the data around population, looked at the enrollment data on Ashby, and then looked at the physical facility, and then looked at the town's history of supporting capital investment, and then also looked at the operating agreement that the district is under, it's fairly clear that Ashby, to invest in Ashby, is going to require a level of support among voters of Ashby. There are simply not enough students from other towns that attend there, and capital investments in the schools based on your operating agreement are funded by the town based on proportion of enrollment. And I think Ed or Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, but currently in Ashby, every student but maybe one is an Ashby resident. So under that kind of a proportion, basically Ashby has to make the investment in Ashby for Ashby to continue to be a viable school and the condition it's in. I mean, you have an assessment on the building that's close to $5 million of work that would need to be done in pre-COVID numbers. Anybody in construction will tell you that we're 30% above that easily right now. Looking at the history of debt exclusion votes in Ashby and the difficulty in getting even the police building invested in, we felt it was incumbent on us to ask that question and to ask some direct questions. The other two elementary schools don't have those issues. So that wasn't a particular area that we need to focus on in the survey.
Right. No, I feel like I missed the opportunity to understand those kinds of responses from the parents in the other towns. So I was disappointed to see the focus so hard on Ashby when it would have been valuable to have that kind of feedback from the other towns on how they feel about it. And I got to be honest, it almost feels like we're moving towards we already know our alternate that would be recommended. So that's a little frustrating to me because I would rather see a more open-minded approach.
Well, again, you won't see a recommendation from us. That's the recommendation, and the path forward is going to be something that the school committee is going to have to make the decision on ultimately, but it's an option. As I understand, it's been an option for a number of years in the discussion. So we didn't necessarily see the value in asking the question of residents in other towns, what they felt about the closure of a school in another town. So we targeted those questions just to people that answered that in the affirmative that they were a resident of Ashby. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's disappointing, but it makes sense.
Okay.
Thanks,
Fair
Susan.
enough.
Randy?
Just to
Anybody else?
piggyback on what Susan was saying, as far as not hearing from the other towns on closing a school, not in their town, it's in their district. And I think that also would have been valuable information to know if there was any concern about shutting down schools in the district, because it talks to capacity, it talks to a lot about the district and how people feel about us, on how we're keeping up with all of the buildings, whether there's preferential treatment for one particular town or anything like that. It could be a lot of information just talking about the district as a whole. So I just concur with Susan.
Yeah, I'll just, I mean, and I hear what you're saying. And the information that we do have, while it's not what you're asking for, we do have information on, how they feel about the current facilities. And we have information on how they feel about having local schools at different levels. So we could definitely, if we haven't already, kind of parse out how do residents of other towns feel about everybody having a local elementary school. Again, while not specifically asking the question of how it would feel to close an elementary school, I don't know if there's any inference that could be made in thinking about the percent of respondents that say it's important to have an elementary school in each of the 3 towns. Again, while not directly answering, your question, it is something that, I'm happy to, share again or parse out in a different way for you.
Any other questions before we move on to the next piece?
Yeah, Michael, I got just a question around, so I think you opened one of the earlier, or Shelley, you opened early with some data around parents care more about what's in the building than necessarily the building itself, but then the answers to the questions seem to lean towards supporting capital projects, not wanting to close buildings, things like that. So I'm just curious how those two reconcile with each other, in your opinion, at least at this point.
Sure. So, I think that the questions on the up-to-date, the way I would think about that is, capital spending, it's important to keep the buildings, I would say there. It's important to have successful programming within the buildings. And there is going to be a certain level of upkeep that's necessary to provide quality programming, to provide the technology, that students are going to need, the things that are going to make their experience, their academic and non-academic, better. But just to update a building, just to have it be, for the sake of, it's a nicer building or whatnot. It's more about what's taking place within. But there is, obviously, if you have a situation where a school can't be open because it's in a certain level of disrepair, or if a project needs to be done to enhance the learning and the life of the student inside that building, then there is great support for that. But that question about how important is it to have modern, up-to-date, excellent facilities, that wasn't as important as things such as the academics that are offered within the building, the extracurriculars that are offered, special education, the arts, all of that.
Yeah, and I'd concur with everything Shelley said. And I would add, though, a thing to keep in mind in looking at it is every one of the attributes that we asked about has a fairly significant facilities component to it. So especially when you look at the specials and special ed programming and the extracurricular stuff, a lot of those activities have a need for additional non-classroom space. And so there is a direct relationship to just kind of getting outside of the classroom and how well does a facility meet the other special programming needs, and is that consistent across all the different campuses? And we'll be looking at that, and we'll talk about that a little bit further down the road in the slides and in the report. But that's also a big focus, is whether or not the facilities have the capacity in their current configuration to offer the same level of programming across all.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Well, if we can move on. So I'm going to give, just so that we have enough time to have our discussion, I'm going to give you more or less the same presentation that we gave to establish the foundation for the public engagement sessions. And this is really a high-level look at the data that we've analyzed thus far, just really a piece of it. But some of the pieces that we feel are the important ones to really ground this discussion in fact and in data as much as we could. So I like to give a bottom line up front about what I'm about to go over, just to kind of draw your attention to it, make it clear what I'm about to tell you about. So this may not be a surprise, it may be a surprise, but all 3 towns really have stalled in terms of growth. And more importantly, within that, they're aging at a very rapid rate. And you simply don't have the sustainable trend of young people and people with families moving into that district. And that's fueling a decline in enrollment. We've looked at economic development activity across all 3 towns. And, there's some blips in there, certainly, and there's some new construction happening, but the larger trends don't support any real reversal in the population trends that we've seen. Again, there are one-offs, certainly, but not only is there not the data to support any real growth activity, there don't seem to be any plans to fuel any growth. There are no active economic development strategies in any of the three towns that we've seen, and there's really nothing on the regional level that gives us any reason to think that we're going to see a massive reversal in the trends in population and enrollment over the next foreseeable future. So you know this already, Brad has told you before, but enrollments declined significantly in the past decade. And there's nothing we're seeing that tells us that that's going to change. Because of this, we've got cost per pupil is increasing at really an unsustainable rate. Overall costs are increasing at a lesser rate than that cost per pupil, but they're still going up while your enrollment is trending down. We feel, based on the data that we've seen, that there is some excess building capacity across the district, but we also need some additional information on the way these spaces are used. But it's fairly clear that operating and maintenance costs are one thing driving these increased costs, and they're also one thing that can be controlled. That's probably one of your easier variables to control. You've got two facilities that you need to make significant investments in, Ashby and Hawthorne Brook. There were assessments done in 2020. Both are significant, and Brad can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe both would be debt exclusion projects as opposed to being able to fund with existing debt service resources. So this is the time to think about the footprint. Think about the way the buildings are used, and think about the best way to use the buildings to meet where the district is heading in the future. So here's your population. This is a little bit different than what we presented to the public engagement sessions, mostly because we finally got census data. Census Bureau has been really delayed in releasing things. So there are a couple of different numbers I'm going to show you. These are actually population estimates done by the Census Bureau under one of their programs. This is not our 2020 census number. These are the estimates. And a lot of the other data I'll show you are the estimates. We're waiting on the detailed census numbers, but we have current census numbers now simply on population. So 2010 census, 2020, you picked up 427 people across all three towns. That's a total percent change of 1.82%. The rest of Massachusetts has been in the mid to high twos, and certainly balanced across most age groups as well. So this is the actual census. Again, what I just showed you were the estimates. This is a comparison of what the past estimates have been in terms of their accuracy. And my guess is when we actually get detailed, up-to-date aging data and population data, that we're going to see those estimates come down. So, we're almost 1,000 people off. When they did this 10 years ago, there were only 8 people off. So I think the estimates are possibly a little optimistic. This is the one that I think concerns us the most, and these are our ages. So what you have in the red are your 20 to 55, your young families, people that would have kids in district. Your blue line, age 19 and under, 55 and up. Look at the increase and compare that to the other two. So you have undoubtedly an aging population. Again, these are the estimates. We don't have 20 data, the aging, but I suspect that what we will end up seeing is, at the very least, this number is going to stay the same based on the accuracy of estimates in the past. But we'll see. Hopefully within the next month or so, we'll start seeing that data get released. So that's what we have for right now. This is the breakdown in those age groups, again, just in a different showing. So you can see that green, that's your aging population. Those are folks that are really aging out of the district in terms of having children. And this is the primary driver of the lower enrollment that you have. It's a trend that Again, we don't see it reversing, but it has been sustained for the last 10 years. So UMass has an institute, I believe out of Amherst, that does a pretty good job of doing projections. And these were based, I think, on the 2015 estimates that the Census Bureau did. We should see those updated fairly soon, but they look at a number of factors: live birth information, permit data, economic development information. And again, the projections are that we're not seeing a significant shift in those population trends. So I'd like Ed to talk a little bit about what that has meant for enrollment, and then talk about how we are using our facilities and what kind of capacity we see. So Ed?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. What we do at Collins is we use the same cohort survival ratio template that NSDEC has used in the past for your district. We use the same thing. It's a pretty standard tool by which to do projections, but you start by looking 10 years back and develop trend lines out of those enrollments. And as you can see, our 10-year elementary enrollment was a 19% decline across all the elementary schools. And then you have them down below the full 10 years. You can see them all trending down, some a little bit more drastically than others, but they're all heading down in the last 10 years. Next slide. In the middle and high school, again, not as dramatic perhaps, but they still have that downward trend in the enrollments. This is a 21% decline across the middle and high schools. So between the elementaries at 19 and the middle schools and the high school at 21%, that's a systemic decline. There's no question. There's not, as Mike said, there's not something out there that looks like it's going to produce any shift, dramatic shift in the enrollments coming into the future. So now we take those 10 years and we develop these ratios and we come up with our projections. And these are the projections that we did. And somewhat, I have to caution us all to think that part of the problem with COVID was really throwing a monkey wrench into all these projections. But we did. And I think Mike said that the one that I had done for the last year was just off by one student. So I think they're pretty good in terms of their accuracy. You can see there's not a significant decline, but there's no increase either. It's pretty much a flat projection for the next 5 years. We could go out 10 years. It becomes less and less accurate. So it's really not worth looking at the 10-year. And it's not going to make a big difference. If you look back 10 years, there's nothing in those 10 years that would indicate there's a bulge coming through the system. There isn't. It isn't coming. So it's not worth doing anything more than looking at the 5 years. The next slide. These are the average class sizes. Again, these are district numbers. These are the numbers we get from the district based on enrollments, current enrollments. And as you can see, the numbers for the elementary schools are pretty close to 20 to 22, something in that range. A few of the classes look a little bit low. Certainly look at Ashby, grade 1 and grade 4. They're particularly low. Some of the others are a little bit higher than we would like. For instance, second grade at Ashby is a little bit higher than we would like, but that necessitates just a staffing change. We would then break that group into two. Once you reach 26, we'd break that into two classes of 13. But those are the average class sizes. In the middle schools, they're hovering, again, pretty close to what we would expect some middle schools to be, somewhere in a range of about 20. Next slide. This is the one that I found most interesting of all the information that we looked at. We looked at the total number of students on IEPs, and it's about 10% of your enrollment. Of that, it's a little bit more than that, excuse me, it's closer to 20%.
That's the 10% increase over the 10 years.
10% increase. What we have here is a shift from full inclusion, where you have students who are included in regular ed classrooms, and a partial inclusion means they're half of their day roughly is in special education, half that's in regular education. We have a shift over that 10 years, regular full inclusion up, partial inclusion down. But the next one is the one that really opened my eyes when I saw that. The number of students with IEPs and substantially separate programs has gone up dramatically. Now, to me, that speaks well of the district's efforts to keep special needs students in district. because these students are the ones who need the most help and the most support and most services. And rather than send them to a collaborative program or an out-of-district private school placement, which costs a lot more money, you're keeping them in district. That's a very positive trend. We applaud you for that. It's keeping the students in the least restrictive environment as defined by the law, meaning closer to the regular inclusion classrooms as possible. So, and your out-of-district number of 11% is low. That's relatively low, looking at most districts across the state. So some good news, some bad news, but it's really not bad news. The partial inclusions have gone down significantly, but we believe those students are now being serviced in substantially separate classrooms or in full inclusion classrooms as appropriate. Next slide. This one, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that first column, the design capacity. Please remember that the design capacity was designated when the building was designed and built. So for some of our buildings, it's a little bit, it's quite a few years ago, but the size of the classrooms, the number of offices and non-academic spaces, the spaces for specials and for special education, the infusion of technology, all of those things impact design capacity. Older buildings used to take like 900 square feet per classroom, and that was it. Yeah, every classroom was 900 square feet, end of the story. And it had 25 to 30 kids in the classroom. Newer classrooms aren't designed that way. They're designed very, very differently. Schools are designed very differently. They have space now for special education that 20 years ago we didn't have. We have breakout rooms that we didn't have. We have STEM fabrication labs and maker spaces that we didn't have 20 years ago. Small group instruction. We didn't do a lot of that in the past. So that design capacity really is a static number that was assigned when that building was open. So looking at that, but that's the best number we have to start with. Looking at the enrollments, going horizontally now, I would forget Squannacook because you know that most of Squannacook isn't a school. I mean, it's got central offices, got other administrative things going on in there. So that 18% utilization of the design capacity, discount that. That's really not relevant. Ashby, now this does include the wing that is currently closed. The design capacity was 300, enrollment of 165. So they're at about 55% utilization of design capacity. Spalding, a little bit better at 68%. Varnum at 54%. Hawthorne at 84.5, and the Census at 63.4, and the high school at 96.1. So there's a whole range of things that impact that design capacity, but it does give you some idea that we do have excess capacity more in some schools than in other schools. And I think the next slide, Mike, I think gives you that sense of it. We took the number of classrooms and the number of regular education classrooms, not your sub-separates, not any of the maker spaces, not any of the special spaces, none of the sped spaces. This is just your straight regular education classrooms. If you look at Ashby, they have they have basically 9 classrooms that they're using. They only need 7, but they're using 9. Spalding, you can see has a number of classrooms available, but the number of classes that they're occupying with regular education, there's a little bit of a gap there. So they've got some excess capacity that they're using in a different way. That's what the middle line tells you. They are using the space, even though it's not occupied by a regular full classroom. They're doing something in that classroom, whether it's the sub-separates or whether it's specials, makerspace, whatever. Barnum Brook, even more so. That's a very dramatic difference between the number of classes that are required to operate the regular education program versus what they're using. Now, I don't fault principals for using spaces that are available. That's a good thing. You don't want to have empty classrooms. And I'm sure they're using them for very productive and useful activities. But it does tell you that Varnum Brook has a very significant number of classrooms that are not being used as regular classrooms, being used for something else to support the educational program. Hawthorne Brook and Nissitissit, again, same situation. There's a pretty significant number at Nissitissit. Next slide, I think, is that's you, Mike. So
yeah, so I can talk to this just a little bit. So just real quick, we're going to just throw a little bit of cost data out there. So there's a lot of things going on in this particular graph, but I think the things that are worth looking at are the overall trends one, and those would be your stacked columns. And I think what you see really is a pretty sustained increase, especially over the last 3 to 4 years. 20 is a tough year to look at. So we're actually not trying to do a whole lot of looking during the COVID years, because not only was it just a mess all around, but money was being moved in and out of different accounts on a regular basis, trying to keep up with the different types of stimulus funding that was out there. So really just, we're trying to keep our financial analysis to 19 and beyond. Dave, you have a question? I see a hand up.
Yes. Do you have the numbers? Well, do you have the population numbers for 20?
We have the population numbers. We don't have the drilled down detail yet. You're talking about the town populations.
Correct.
Yeah, the census data has been released, but only the tables that have race and total population, and they did that for the redistricting. The rest of the stuff we're still waiting on. Susan?
Just a quick question on the previous slide with classrooms. Is that regular ed classrooms? Because I know
Yes.
we have some significant programs
Yes.
Correct.
in the schools. So the green bar is just like the regular typical classrooms.
Correct.
Yes,
That's absolutely
based
correct.
on the actual regular classes, not specials, not special ed or subseparate.
Right, because we certainly those students need to be somewhere, and they wouldn't be in the green classroom. So it's not like these are sitting empty. Just to clarify
Correct.
for anybody that might be listening in a later point, these are kids in a separate program. We could send those students out of district, but we've set up an excellent program within our district
Yes.
and are using those classrooms for that, which is very cost effective.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is, especially for Varnum Brook, where most of your sped stuff is centered. I mean, that's an important point. And one thing you'll see on one of our later slides is that's actually the last little piece that we want to look at, is on the elementary level, the actual uses of these classes that aren't identified as primary classrooms. So that's the last little piece we want to really dig into, is how we're using them. Because like Ed said, the principals are using them for productive educational space. How are they using them? We've got to get a better sense of that capacity issue before we move any further down the road.
Right. Not to mention all the other reasons why it's great to have those students in our district and in our
Yep.
schools. I think it benefits those particular students in those programs immensely, along with the other students in the building. So I didn't want to gloss over that and have folks think that these are just like extra fun rooms that kids can go to.
No.
They're actually servicing, they're actually an extremely important service that's being provided to those students in the district.
And Brad, you had something to add?
Yes, I just wanted to give some context to the bar graph. Again, just for the listening public, and it kind of goes along with the red column for each of the schools. Currently, right now, as far as unused classrooms in the district, we have 2 in Ashby, 1 at Hawthorne Brook, and 1 at Nissitissit. So we have 4 classrooms right now in the district that you could say could be used for other classes and things of that nature. But again, this is counting regular education classrooms only, not your specials, not your special education classes, sub-separate special education, so on and so forth. So we don't have a lot of open space in the district, just to clarify that. It kind of goes again with the classrooms in use, and they're being put to very good use.
All right, so let me just move on to the next little piece. So again, we're looking at general fund expenditures only, and breaking them out by the major categories, but also wanted to add those 2 secondary access lines there that have our change in enrollment and our overall % change in expenditures. The change in enrollment, almost every one of those numbers is a decline. So we're seeing fewer and fewer students within the district and higher costs. And so that's what we're looking at, is how we can begin to contain those costs. So Brad, you want to add something to that? Your hand was up, so I'm not sure if that was.
Oh, no.
A leftover
Sorry,
hand?
I did not. I didn't pull it down from before.
Oh, that's okay.
Yes, lower it.
So, and when we do get into the draft report, we're going to have quite a bit more information on the expenditure side of things, but we wanted to keep it kind of top level and just look at general fund. So we actually took, and we back up and say what we intend to do with all of our numbers is really try to use the DESE numbers so that we have good figures that we can compare across with other districts, which will be part of our overall report also, is comparisons between these other districts that are like you. Where we were unable to do that because of the way DESE structures their data is actually looking at per pupil expenditure on a school by school basis over time. So we actually had broken down, deconstructed the general fund for every one of those years and reconstructed it the way that they present the information across the district. And then with that information, we are allocating district-wide costs and central office costs based on different drivers of those costs. So facility maintenance, we're allocating based on square footage. Teacher support costs that are carried at the district level or the central office level, we're allocating those by enrollment. We have other things that we're allocating by staffing levels, such as benefits, and breaking all those costs out so that we can actually look at a cost per student in the individual school. So that's what you have here. Again, Squannacook's kind of odd because we have a huge jump year to year in enrollment there, depending on the year you look at. So it's kind of all over the place. But the rest of the schools are seeing very, very similar trends, except when we look at Ashby. And that's primarily being driven by the by the low number of students sharing that cost, but also by the class sizes that you've seen. This was actually through 1920. We did not want to use any numbers that hadn't been audited yet. So that's what we have right there. Susan, did you have a question on that?
You mentioned this was based on square footage, and it was also
adjusted.
Okay, because and you just noted earlier on Ashby that there was some square footage that was closed and not being used. So I would.
Yes, this actually does. I'm glad you brought that up because that's a good point to mention. We actually went back and looked at additions and closures of different pieces of buildings over that 2011 through 2020 period and adjusted the square footage that drove those allocations. So when they closed that wing, that's reflected in the Ashby numbers. When we brought the new high school online and changed the square footage, that's reflected in the high school numbers. And I think there may have been an addition or two at some of the other facilities, but it's reflective of the square footage that was in operation at the time.
Thank you.
Randy?
Yes, just asking again about what goes into the number for the per pupil expenditure with Ashby Elementary going up. Actually, this would be more of a question for Brad. When did we move the SPED programs out? Because the STEPS programs was there and that was moved out. And so that's a significant drop in the number of students in Ashby at some point, which I don't know if the timing is right on when that went up, as well as were teacher costs in the calculation here as far as the individual teacher salaries, or how did you account, or is it just facilities that you were looking at?
No, this is all of your educational costs. This is instructional technology. This is everything that hits the general fund, and the teacher costs are actually already captured in line item accounts per school, except in those cases where there may be shared between multiple schools. We had to estimate on those cases. And also importantly in Massachusetts, typically benefit costs are accounted for at the district level as opposed to at the school level. So we allocated those based on overall salary numbers. Not perfect, but as close as we can get with the data we have.
And the special education programs were moved in 2021. So last year would have been their first year.
Yeah, and so that's one of the other, if you look at this, we tried not to use things that would have been impacted by COVID. And then also that, the cutoff would have been before that program moved. You'll see that in some other slides. And we'll dig a little bit deeper in this when we get the October 1 number certified, number one, but also when we have audited figures for all the general fund expenditures.
Thank you.
And so moving on, this is just looking at facility and maintenance costs. And again, we're talking both the costs that are carried in an account at the school level by the coding on the account, but also an allocated amount based on square footage. You have district-wide facility costs that are, bulk purchases of materials and things like that. The best way we have to allocate those is using some kind of a driver. In the case of facilities, we're using square footage in use. So this is our trends on square foot or on operation and maintenance costs. And one of the reasons we do focus on this to some degree is this is a cost we might have an opportunity to control, is facility costs. I mean, we have some ability to operate things more efficiently. We have the ability to use spaces in different ways. So it's one of the few drivers in educational costs that you guys actually have some control and some levers over, which is one of the reasons we're spending some time talking about facilities specifically. Your hands are tied in a lot of your instructional costs. Your transportation costs are going to be what they're going to be. We'll have some levers on those, but facility costs are really one of the areas that we can impact those drivers. So this is our trend. Again, we have Squanicook and Ashby obviously being on a significantly different trend than what we see consistently across the other schools. So, and I mentioned this earlier, why are we talking about all this now? You've got decisions to make on two facilities, big ones. Hawthorne Brook and Ashby have significant issues that need to be dealt with. They're most likely going to be debt exclusion. And in the case of Ashby, it's going to be a project that's going to be funded largely by residents of that town. Hawthorne Brook, obviously being a regional draw, is going to be shared based on enrollment, based on prior year foundation enrollment. But you're still talking about significant costs. Now, these were 2020 costs. And I'm sure, Brad, I know you've shared these with the district, so they've seen all this information, or excuse me, with the committee, so they've seen all this. Randy, you have a question? Oh, Susan, I see multiple hands and what looks like a hot dog. Okay, so go ahead, Susan.
Could you back up a couple slides? Yes. How are these we lease a good section of Squanicook out. I don't know how that is factored in here, because some residents of our community believe that Squanicook is sitting like at least half empty, if not more. And my understanding is we are using Squanicook. Now, maybe not for our district kids, but we are also generating revenue by using a portion of Squanicook. So I don't want to mislead anyone into thinking that that building is just sitting there empty and there's so few kids versus the costs, because the cost is being offset by the revenue. And I don't know if that revenue is being factored into the analysis on this slide and the prior slide.
I can tell you definitively that unless that revenue is netted out against the expenditures before they become expenditures, then no, it's not been considered. We looked only at the expenditures. I think Nancy would have to answer whether or not there's any offsets in those actual expenditure accounts. But this is just expenditures. When we do the overall report, because a good piece of what we're looking at are revenue trends and revenue opportunities, that is something we look at a little bit more in depth, but this is just on the expenditure side.
Michael, too, I can certainly address the space prior to Nancy addressing any of the lease components, but To be honest, with regard to Squanicook, between central office staff, the preschool, and the lease with the Keystone Collaborative, there is not a single space in that building that is not being used. Everything is occupied. Every single classroom, every office is being put to use. So there's nothing that's being used for storage or anything along those lines. We actually are pushed with the lease to give Keystone as much as they possibly can have within that building. And we actually added some preschool space this year as well. So there's absolutely no space. And we ended up moving the facilities department over to the high school from Squanicook to allocate for more preschool space.
So yeah, certainly we saw how many classrooms were available in the district and not being used. And we have human beings that need a spot to be. We need the central office. We don't have a lot of other space. So just a note to factor that in. If something were to happen to that building, we need a place for all of the employees and students in that building.
Yes, I mean, in essence, you would need a place, a central office, and you would need at minimum 8 classrooms, 8 classrooms for preschool, which again, the district does not have.
Yeah, and we'll, like I mentioned earlier, that is our next piece that we've got to dig into, and you'll see it on, I think the last slide is we want to get all of the details on those spaces that aren't accounted for by traditional classrooms. So I think that's going to mean Ed and I are making another trip up there and talking with your principals, talking with you, and talking with Oscar to get that sorted out, because we definitely don't have in our inventory of the classrooms administrative uses and specials certainly. And that's a big piece of it that we need to have in the analysis. Randy, did you have something else, or is that a leftover hand?
Just a quick question, wondering whether when we get this presentation, if we're going to have any of the backup data, kind of what goes into some of these costs and any of the back end numbers.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
So again, looking at the assessments, this is why we're having the discussion. I can tell you, and I don't know if any updated cost estimates have been done, but we've seen close to 30% increases on costs just in the last year. And this is beyond just the supply chain issues, but the labor market has changed drastically around construction, and everything is coming in higher. Also, interestingly, I was curious why on this particular, the way that they set these things up, so they've got this final scope 3 on both of these. Anything you touch in scope 1 or scope 2 is pretty much going to make mandatory that you have to deal with the things in scope 3. So it's highly likely that doing good chunks of this work is going to trigger requirements to meet all the code and accessibility requirements across the facility. Especially if you look at the way that 521 CMR triggers their jurisdiction, which is essentially a ratio of the value of the building compared to the value of the repairs. And because we see such high costs on repairs now, ratios that didn't used to trigger that are triggering it now, that require you to bring an entire facility up to compliance if you meet a certain threshold of doing work within that facility. So I say all that to say that both the estimate here for Hawthorne Brook and also Ashby, there's a high likelihood they're significantly low. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather, and this is where we need your input. And that's what we'd like to spend the rest of the time doing, is hearing where you want to take this. So Heather.
Good evening, everyone. So this is really the portion of the evening that is set aside for you to share your thoughts, to talk amongst each other. And we're simply going to try and facilitate using some predetermined questions. And we ask that you just openly discuss your thoughts. So with that being said, to maintain a timing perspective, we understand that by policy, we have to be complete by 10 o'clock. I'm going to put 15 minutes on per slide, and I'll just try and keep you on a timetable so that you can manage to touch upon all the questions that we've sort of posed. That being said, I created 3 general topics. So we're going to kick off with just general reactions. The first question is really to all the committee members, what are your reactions to all of what we've presented and asked you to digest over the last hour and so?
Do you mind just quickly showing us the other slide so we to know if we should save our question for those instead of bringing it up here?
Sure, I could go through them all. So aside from general reactions, then the next question, which we did hear, at least 2 people were, is there anything else that you would like us to consider or that you would like for information? Then topic 2 is covers programming and facilities. And then topic 3 covers revenue and then other enrollment type opportunities that we may be asked to look at later on. So if you're comfortable, I'm going to start the timer and we'll start with just your general reactions to all of the data.
Ask folks to raise their hands and we'll just go in order and we'll get through this. June?
Yes, I was thinking about the slide that was the enrollment projections were basically flat. Like we kept hearing that it's decreasing, but you showed the 5-year projection that really didn't change that much. So I found that a little odd, especially where Ashby had more like double the building permits pulled this year than any prior years, because we are in a state of growth in Ashby right now. And I think, and it is a very recent state of growth. I think it was COVID driven, with people moving out of cities because they're working remotely and stuff, and people are leaving the cities and they're coming to smaller towns more. And it's funny because Ashby was actually mentioned as a top 5 desirable town to move to from a city, just in an article a couple months ago. So we're definitely, you know, I've been seeing the houses going on the market and turning quickly around here. We have a lot of new families and big families coming into town. So it's, I am just wondering what your thoughts are as far as how, you know, COVID and smaller towns growing may affect those numbers.
I can speak, I think, to the permit data, and there's one of the things you'll see cited in our final report. There have been a number of studies done, really from a planning perspective, and most demographers tend to agree that you really are looking at, in the aggregate over time, about one child added to a district for every 25 rooftops that a permit is pulled for. We're, again, like you said, this is recent data. The permit data we saw was, I believe the cutoff date of what we received would have been this past summer. There were quite a few permits for Ashby. It was actually surprising. There were a lot of demo permits, and there were a lot of new construction permits. There were addition permits. There were renovation permits. Until we see a sustained trend, I don't see an appreciable change that is going to result in a dramatic reversal of 20% decline over 10 years. Is there potential for some change? Yeah, and I think actually, Brad may have mentioned this when they were talking about the enrollment data. You saw the highest percentage of Ashby students that you've had in a little while in the district. It's a change. Is it a sustainable trend? It's hard to say. Again, we're looking at the data and running with what the trends are and drawing, you know, our projections from that. Are there going to be anecdotal things and one-time events that might influence it? Yeah. Do we know what they're going to be until we've seen a sustained trend? I don't know that we can answer that. So we'll certainly present that as a caveat of, hey, we've seen this blip in growth. I think it's up to the school committee ultimately to decide whether that data is sufficient to warrant, changes in the way facilities are used. And Ed, did you have anything you wanted to mention on the enrollment projection itself?
No, the only thing I would mention is that, NSDEC did enrollment projections for many years and always showed a decline in enrollment, even going out. The projections were not significantly different than what we're projecting, which is kind of flat, not an increase. May have stopped the decline, but it's not shifting back up. I don't think the district will ever have the same number of kids that they had 20 years ago. Just the numbers just don't support it.
Jessica? You're muted, Jessica.
I'm surprised at how little we utilize the schools to their fullest intent. I've been working, I know, with the director of the Townsend Recreation, and we're trying to get through some hurdles and trying to get her better utilization of the summer school program. And we're hitting all kinds of issues with that. For her to use our schools that are really unused in the summertime. I think that we really need to, look at alternative measures like we were talking about earlier, maybe outside companies using the school for academic purposes and such like that. I think that's what really surprised me the most out of all of this.
Thank you, Jessica. Randy?
As far as other analysis I'd like to see, I would be interested to see the state demographics. Usually when we've seen our area, we've also seen the state demographics to see what's going on in the state, because especially unfortunately with the COVID, there's been a big shuffle. But generally, there's been good correlation with the state and where the state is going. Because at some point, we need to, it really is looking at how many, younger people there are who are going to be getting to age of having kids, that are going to determine which towns grow and which towns don't as far as their schools. I know it shows that we have an aging population at the moment, but I just like to see, if we're following the same trends as the state.
Thank you, Randy. Anybody else? Susan?
I think as far as the data analysis, certainly worth, if not, if this group doing the study is not familiar with the MSBA rules around taking buildings offline, you can remove your eligibility to get loans in the future and get grants from the state. They are very specific. I don't remember what they are, but I dug into it pretty deep a number of years ago. If you come in asking for money because you need an addition or a new building, and you've taken schools offline, then you're not qualified. Something in that nature, which is why I would need you guys to look into that and understand it and factor it into your analysis. So we're not caught with an unpleasant surprise if we do take a school offline.
I guess I don't see any other hands. So just for me, I don't think any of the demographics were necessarily surprising. I think what I'd want to understand a little more about is how we're utilizing the buildings, not just how much they're being utilized, but the specific purposes of each, to know if there's programs that are maybe revenue generating programs or programs that could move elsewhere to better utilize certain buildings and shuffle things around. And then I know there was one chart, I think there was an asterisk back on the, I think it was the design capacity slide where Ashby Elementary had the asterisk next to it saying the wing that's closed was actually in those figures. So I'd be interested to know if you take out the wing that's not being used, what that looks like. Because I don't know if that is in a state of, it has to be torn down, or if there's even the potential of rehabilitating that, or if it's beyond that. But I don't know how useful it is to include that in any calculations if there's no chance on being able to use that in the future.
Okay.
Tom, did you have a question? Sorry, I just saw your hand go up.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just going to ask if any of the information you gathered provided what you might like envision as opportunities. So I think kind of similar to what you were saying, Craig, just, are there opportunities from any of that information that, the district could capitalize on?
I think like Heather had mentioned when we kind of kicked out, we're looking for your ideas and your input and your thoughts on those things now. We'll absolutely put a number of things in our final report, but the hope was that we would get some input and some ideas from you guys that have been looking at this for quite a while now.
I guess to put that back, I guess a little bit, when I look at just Ashby and some of the numbers, the picture being painted is we're not utilizing the building enough. The cost therefore is higher because we're underutilizing that. And is there opportunity to increase utilization of that building to then bring down the cost and make it maybe more on par with the rest of the district and have that be more of a, I don't want to say equal player, because I don't feel like it's not equal, but just more in line with existing expenditures. And I'm assuming there's repairs that are needed to be able to do that. But then does that mean you shift students from elsewhere, from the west end of Townsend into Ashby? Like, are those things you want us to come up with, or are those things that you would present, or is that a combination, or is that what we're discussing now?
Brad?
So I just wanted to add, because I do know that it has come up a few times with why the enrollment has dropped in Ashby. And a couple of things have been driven by decisions that have been made within the district. First and foremost was moving the sub-separate special education programs. And I know the committee's aware of this, but I know there are people on the call as well who would probably like to know why the sub-separate special education programs moved to Varnum. Reality of the situation is that the sub-separate special education programs at the middle school level are also in Pepperell. Centralizing the K-8 sub-separate special education programs made a lot of sense. From a supervisory standpoint, there's an evaluation team chair that is able to supervise those programs, pay attention, deal with problems within those programs, and that person is stationed in Pepperell daily. The other piece was that the district was able to save a significant amount of money. Again, where Ashby does have the smallest number of students in the district, they also have the smallest number of students in the sub-separate special education programs. So financially, it made no sense at all to have special education vans driving students from Townsend and Pepperell to Ashby when the majority of those students were actually from Pepperell. So the district was able to save a significant amount of money on special education transportation. And then looking at school choice had been a big thing. We said no to school choice this year because of COVID. We did not know what the beginning of the school year was going to look like. And one of the issues with school choice, again, the committee's aware of this, not sure the public is that if you have a class of 24 students and you in grade 2 and you take in 5 or 6 school choice students, you've in essence created another section. And those 5 or 6 students are going to bring the district $25,000 to $30,000, because they're $5,000 a piece. They're not going to come anywhere close to covering a teacher with benefits to fill that new section. And that is something that had been happening annually, where double sections were being created and they were filled with school choice. And it's great to fill a section with school choice students because that's of some benefit. But if you're creating another section because of school choice, that then has to be carried on for years and years until the students potentially graduate, you've cost the district a substantial sum of money because you're having to hire teachers, and the choice funds don't cover it. They don't even come close. You would, in essence, need to have a classroom of 20 school choice kids to cover a first-year teacher with benefits. Or pretty close to it. Between $85,000 and $100,000 would be the cost. So that's why the population in Ashby has dropped a bit. It had nothing to do with trying to take students out of Ashby, but making more financially sound decisions for the district.
So just so everyone's aware, we're coming up on 15 minutes. If I'll leave it to the chair to decide if he wants to continue on this particular discussion or if we want to move on to the topic 2 that really will involve more discussion among members.
I think we can move on to the next one, just looking at the clock.
All right. So the next one is meant to really ask for members to have an active discussion amongst each other and provide feedback to us and the superintendent as well on some of these topics that have to do with programming. So the first one is an interesting question, but really we figure you probably know the answers to these more so than we ever would. Each school certainly has its own unique character and community, but do you feel that among all 3 elementary schools that the students are receiving the same or similar education experience, readying them equally for the eventual transition to middle school, or just the experience in general? So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Susan?
Mine's more along the lines of the second bullet here. If that's okay. I just wanted to note that during I guess it's called the Great Recession, we did make some decisions to close buildings. One of them was Peter Fitz, and the other one was going to be Squanicook. But it didn't make sense in the end of the analysis. But each elementary school used to have its own preschool. And by bringing it all together into a single preschool, we ended up having some benefits. For example, OT and PT, we were able to offer that all in the same place and not lose time for those individuals during travel. They were able to offer more services. So one of the things as you do your analysis, keeping in mind that grouping programs together can also have cost benefits. Facilities. I don't think my other 2 items necessarily fall into I guess one of the things that fall into that is my understanding is one of the reasons that program used to be in Ashby is that since Ashby has relatively small class sizes, usually in the high teens, it was a better environment to have inclusion for those students in the substantially separate programs. It is more effective to include them in a classroom of 17 or 18 kids than to include them in a classroom of 24 kids at some of the other schools. So that was a real benefit having the program there. It was better for inclusion opportunities for those students. I don't think my other 2 items have a spot on the slide.
Rod, did you have something else, or is your hand still up from before?
Craig, was that for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't know if your hand was. Yeah, I don't know if your hand was still up.
Yes, yes, I did just want to speak to the first bullet. I think that we're getting there. That's something that we have worked to do to really try to create a regional school district, to have the 3 elementary schools and the building leadership working together to make sure that students are being prepared for middle school is consistently as possible, regardless of what town they are in. So I don't think that has much to do really with the the state of any one building as far as the facility itself. I think that has to do with improved communication between the 3 building principals and the assistant principals, and making sure that that happens with regard to making sure that the curriculum is consistent, the experiences are consistent. And it's something that I think we're getting there without a doubt.
June, and then Randy, and then if no one else, back to Susan.
Yes, to address the offerings and if everything is similar between the 3 schools, to a point, there's an overall sense among the community of Ashby, as you may have heard during some of your surveys, that Ashby kind of gets the shaft. And honestly, to point blank tell you, that's kind of what drove me to the board here, is to speak up for Ashby, because even as of last year, during COVID, when there were internet cafes set up, Townsend was offered one, Pepperell was offered one, Ashby was not offered one until I pushed for it, because just because we're smaller, really. And again, curbside lunch pickup, same kind of thing. Ashby wasn't going to even have that offering. So there are many times that Ashby's overlooked because of its size. Even right now, talking about the interventionists that are in the schools, there's one in Ashby who can only part-time do the work and is sometimes covering for the secretary and covering for recess aides and doing other things there, because there's not as many people at that school. Specials, where we had full-time specials all the time for specialist teachers. Then we had a gymbrarian. So our gym teacher was also the librarian. And, maybe not, I mean, he was great, but maybe his specialty was more in one area than the other, but that's kind of what we had to do. And now this year, there's not actually any full-time specials teachers at Ashby. They're shared with another school and they're only part of the time. So there is definitely differences in experience, and there has been. And it wasn't always like that. Again, when the SPED program was at Ashby, there was large enough class sizes. We did have all 5 specialist teachers there all the time. So we've seen this kind of change and fluctuate a little bit over the past few years. All that being said, I just wanted to point out this last question. Are there any options or alternatives that are 100% off the table? I would just like to throw out closing a school in a town that's literally the only school that they have, and pretty much the only thing that they have in the town. I mean, even our library is open very, very part-time. We don't have businesses, and that's the problem. We don't have like that business tax base either. But we don't have anything except our school, and it would affect everybody in town greatly. And I haven't yet heard of a single person that thought it would be a good idea to close this. Even speaking with Superintendent Morgan, said he always felt that every town should have their own elementary school, that it brings a value to the town. I'm still not sure where this question or direction was so driven from, because it doesn't seem like a viable option to me, at least. I don't understand how this study got so far into this talk, because it's not something that we were ever told when we approved this study. There was no mention of anything going on like that. In fact, the example used was perhaps we could maybe shift some Townsend students to Ashby to grow the size of Ashby, something like that. So it's really shocking to me that this has all come to fruition to be at this point of the conversation, but I would like to just take that off the table altogether, really, and, you know, move on from there. But anyhow, I'll let somebody else talk for a minute.
Thanks, June. Randy?
Along those lines, as far as if closing a school is part of an alternative, I just wanted to bring up, we do have MSBA loans that are out in a number of our buildings. And I know that if we close a school that we have a loan on, we will lose the MSBA funding and need to pay back that loan or that grant from them. So that's another consideration if we're thinking about changing the use of a facility or closing a facility. So that please take that into your consideration when you're giving us options, because we took these, you know, grants and loans out because we could not afford to do the work we needed to without that money. We certainly cannot pay it back if that comes to the case. And as far as programming offers, yeah, I agree with June. Ashby kind of starts to go down in size. It gets much more difficult financially to give them everything that the other elementary schools have. I certainly would like to see different ways of increasing their enrollment to a level that is sustainable to keep them on par with the other elementary schools, whether it be redistricting some of the West Townsend students, whether it be a school choice ability to go in there, or something that we're not thinking of. I think that's probably going to be one of the better options to try and help all of our towns and all of our schools.
Thanks, Randy. Dave?
I think one of the really critical points that was made today is just how much pride a school can bring to a community. Ashby's a beautiful community. I get to drive through it every morning. You know, and it's got a great little, you know, main drag. It's fun to drive through. I like it a lot. I can't begin to imagine the devastating consequence that it would be for that community to lose that school. So I just don't see how doing so would be an option. So there you go.
Thanks, Dave. Tom?
Yeah, actually, so I kind of want to counter what Susan said a little bit, and I'm actually curious about maybe having preschool classes in each of the towns. I guess I'd be interested to see, you know, kind of the enrollment figures in those programs when they were in each of the towns. I know, you know, might provide some obstacles in terms of services and things like that, but I'm, you know, just wondering if the enrollment would be enough to offset some of what that might be. So that'd be something that I'd be interested to see.
Thanks, Tom. And Susan, before we get back to you, so I guess for me, I mean, I kind of agree with the sentiment from others in terms of options on 100% off the table. Like way back when I was in elementary school, in my town, we had 4 elementary schools in our town, and there was a campaign by those in power to close one of the schools because enrollment was down and to save money. And as kids in the school, we drew pictures and tried to show the superintendent and the administration and folks what the school meant to us. So we drew pictures and hung them up in the hallways and kind of did a campaign to save our school. And having that pride of a school in your town, and I think forgetting about the bus ride times and things like that, but just having that building that's yours, being able to have that, again, that pride in a place where students go and they know, hey, this is Ashby School, I think is important. I think that goes a long way. And so I would need significantly more compelling data before I would be in favor of even considering that, and that would be after all other possibilities are exhausted. So I think I'm with others in that option probably needs to come off the table. I think that shifts to more towards what specifically needs to happen to make that sustainable. What support is specifically needed from folks to get the building to be what it needs to be in terms of the must-dos, if there's safety concerns and things like that. Like we just need to address those, and let's get a plan in place to do so. I guess to answer the question towards the top around the character and community, I mean, I can only speak to Pepperell, and from my perspective, I've got one son who has transitioned to middle school and another who'll be doing so pretty shortly. So far, so good. So, I mean, that experience has been well. Others that I know, again, have had similar transition experiences as they go to middle school, but I can't speak to the other towns. So that's my piece. Susan, we'll go back to you, and then I think we can go to the next slide.
Try to be brief. One, I completely agree with the pride. I've been on school committee 14 years, and I have heard from multiple administrations over that time when the topic of should Ashby be closed come up is, yeah, you need to have a school, at least one in every town, and that the pride that it brings is extremely important. So I am not inclined at all to be interested in closing Ashby. That was that topic. Another topic was, as far as the last question, anything off the table. And really, I just have a question to the town of Ashby, to the school committee, to the administration about, could this be an option? I know the infrastructure in Ashby is sparse, I should say, as far as buildings go. I believe they do use Ashby to hold their the elementary school hold their town meetings. I've heard that the police station was in quite disrepair. I think that's been corrected. I don't know the condition of town hall. If that is also in perilous conditions, perhaps consider doing something where buildings could be combined using the elementary, including the elementary school. Certainly, you wouldn't want free flow between a town hall and the classrooms, but like a duplex would be for families. Is there a way to completely separate and have different entrances, but share some of the infrastructure as far as heating, et cetera, for multiple purposes as a way to make it more affordable, kind of combining purposes. So that's just, it doesn't need to be answered here, but to throw that out for consideration as to whether there's an issue that would take that off the table. And I would have to say quickly on the preschool program, the reason it was even considered being consolidated together is when we were closing buildings, we were quickly running out of room for preschool. Like in Spalding, once you pulled 3rd and 4th grade into Spalding, which used to be a pre-K to 2 school, there was no room for the preschool programs. So we were running out of space when we were rearranging the buildings. So putting the preschool programs together helped with the space problem. And then we had the side benefit of the cost efficiencies. But I think it's fantastic if we could have a preschool in every town on a theoretical level. Get those kids going to the same school their older brothers and sisters are, and they grow up in that school for multiple years. I think it's a fantastic concept. I'm done.
That's 15 minutes, Chair, if you want to move on to the next slide.
Lisa, do you have something really quick?
Yep, I just have a recommendation to all of the board members to see if you can go on tours of each of the schools to make sure that you fully understand what is at and what is required to make updates to the schools. Just it gives you a better understanding. Just a recommendation.
That's a good idea. Thank you, Lisa. All right, Heather, we can go on. Thank you.
Thank you. And next slide, please. We really appreciate that candid discussion. So let's kind of wrap it up here. So this is this idea of revenue and maybe other opportunities that have been touched upon here and there throughout the discussion, and we've heard some members mention. So if you wouldn't mind giving us some feedback on maybe some opportunities you've seen or you think are a good idea to pursue. I gave one example here about maybe solidifying or formalizing and marketing some of your wonderful special education program to out-of-district students, creating a tuition model. Or then, of course, maybe utilizing some other type of revenue generating model. I know there was a lease mentioned, things of that nature that we could talk about, and you could give us some feedback. So please.
I can certainly start. So just in looking at it, we do, and I don't have the specific numbers, but we do have a tuition in model for out-of-district students for our special ed programs that's currently in place, and it is somewhat successful. So some of our neighboring districts do look at our separate special education programs, and they do look to tuition students into those programs if it makes sense. And just to touch upon the Squanicook situation, where we do lease essentially half of that building out to the Keystone Collaborative. It is something where the district is able to, make some financial gains through that. We don't have a tremendous amount of control over it because Keystone, like most collaboratives, have bylaws with regard to how much they're able to pay for a leased space within one of their member districts, and North Middlesex is a member district of Keystone. So they do essentially set the rate for what they're able to pay and what they will pay for those spaces. I think part of the problem's going to be with Squanicook in particular is that if we're looking at two building projects down the road, where Ashby, for instance, could use some help with the front of the building, the main office area, the entrance, and then that wing. Some of that could be done without a disruption to students. You could have a main office area that's a trailer, so to speak, or a modular classroom. You could have some modular classrooms there. If there was a building project at Hawthorne Brook, that would be a little bit more difficult because they're looking at classroom spaces. And to do that while school is in session, which is essentially what you would have to do, I don't know how the district could do that without having the space that is currently leased to Keystone as a overflow space for classrooms for Hawthorne Brook during a construction project. So that is something that we've talked about. Again, the classrooms in Ashby are in good shape. It's really the front of the building and the wing that needs to come down. So a building project there could potentially happen without disrupting student learning to a point. Whereas where they're actually going to be doing the classrooms at Hawthorne Brook, if a building project were to be approved, where Squanicook is essentially 100 yards away from Hawthorne Brook, I don't know how that space wouldn't be required during a building project at Hawthorne Brook for students to go to while they do the building in sections, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Brad, Susan, and then Randy.
No, Brad, I think that is tying into one of the comments I was going to make, whereas when we retain a building but lease it out, it gives us a lot of opportunities to deal with a variety of situations. Ashby inhabited that building as their elementary school when there was a major building project going up there. And as Brad mentioned, it gives us the ability to move around when we're doing projects. And I'd rather see kids in a building than in modulars outside their building that's being renovated. I think it helps maintain that sense of community. And I also think it by leasing out part of a building or all of a building, it allows us to quickly deal with an unexpected capacity and an unexpected growth. We have that capacity already in the district without building. And then we really can't build if we take a school offline because we have to do it on our own. Because MSBA won't give you any money if you took a school offline within the past X number of years to build a new school. So I think it's really nice to be able to, within reason, hold on to some capacity. And that's how I always saw Squanicook was if Spalding was always busting at the seams, and if there was a capacity issue, we could use Squanicook fairly easily. Right now, it works out great that it's a revenue source. The next thing I wanted to mention is I would like to see listed as one of the alternatives to take a look at our regional agreement and a suggestion of how you may offer options to adjust the regional to help address, issues that are identified in the district. We have that open and on the table and looking at the regional agreement to see if we want to offer to our communities the opportunity to update it. It's been a long time. So perhaps there's a way we can restructure or add to or delete from our regional agreement that might allow us to solve issues that's perhaps would be agreeable to our communities. And I guess I had a quick question about the school choice, Fred. So when you had mentioned about the and I totally agree that if you have 22 kids, you can't take 8 kids in, 4 kids in, students. But we have like specific slots, I think. If we have 18 kids, we'll say we can take in 4 more. Or is there like a rolling problem in the future? So school choice, I would think, is a good thing. It's something that we would want to market. And maybe I just misunderstood what you said, but we control it
Sure.
by only offering slots.
Just to reiterate it from earlier, the reason school choice was essentially a no this year was because of COVID and our return to school, and still, not a tremendous amount. We knew we were coming back in full. We didn't know if we would stay in full in person. I mean, we did not know if we would go to hybrid. We did not know if they were going to push some type of physical distancing on us at some point. So to be taking in extra students this year did not seem to make a lot of sense, especially with where the numbers stood at Ashby, because I know that that's essentially come up. Didn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to accept more students in with the COVID situation. So certainly something we'll look at next year. We'll be bringing it back to the committee again, late winter to discuss it again, and it's probably something that we will be bringing back. But it didn't make a whole lot of sense to do it with COVID.
No, okay, a COVID hiatus makes sense. We're not saying never again. We're saying let's
No,
take a pause and
absolutely not.
reevaluate. Okay,
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
And I'm going to ask one, I'd like Susan to clarify something that she mentioned. So you mentioned looking at the regional agreement. Are you talking about looking at it specifically with regards to the way a project like an Ashby renovation would be approached regionally, as opposed to the current structure where it's basically the town responsible for the costs, capital costs?
And actually, well, it's based on the percentage of students in that school, right? So one option I've seen in other districts is it's like the high school, where really if Pepperell's 50% of the district, Ashby's 12, Townsend's 38. When a project comes up, that's how it's allocated, no matter which town it's in. And it depends on the town. It's kind of like health insurance, where you have pooled risk. So things even out over time. This year, Pepperell might be the beneficiary of the other 2 towns helping deal with a building that has primarily Pepperell students in it. 2 years from now, it might be Townsend as a beneficiary. 6 years from now, it's Ashby or whatever order it comes in, but over time, it all works out because it's pooled risk. But that's just one suggestion, but perhaps there's something else about the regional agreement, if a close look is taken at it, that might be beneficial to trying to resolve some issues that may have been identified or are yet to be identified. So just wanted to throw that out there as something to consider as you're developing options. You may find there's nothing to offer once you look, but does that answer your question?
Sorry, I had a dog in the background, so I had to mute. Yeah, it does. And I think Ashby presents an interesting question because it's a town-owned facility leased. Plus you have the operating agreement issue of, almost 100% of the enrollment is town. So the way the operating agreement is, the capital costs are borne by the town. So I think looking at the operating agreement in terms of having an alternative is certainly something to consider.
I would say there's other buildings that are also owned by towns that we lease. So it's, I think very few are district-wide buildings, but it's a matter of pooling risk. And I don't think you could treat town-owned buildings and district-owned buildings differently.
Randy?
Real quick on the original agreement, if you need any help looking at that, please reach out. The state that it is in right now is very difficult to read. We have a working draft because we have been trying to work this out, but it last was updated in 1972 as far as any substantial change other than a court-ordered readjustment for the school committee allocation in 91 or something like that. And it has a number of amendments that are just really confusing. So we do have a working draft that would probably be a lot easier for you to look at. And I've been working on that for a couple of years now, trying to see what needs to change, because there obviously are updates, but certainly suggestions on anything that might help us reduce costs in the district would be welcome. On another different note, looking at other programs that might draw students in, I know the previous superintendent had always mentioned it would be great to have like a horseman pool. I don't know much about that, but I know if we're bringing in SPED programs that are bringing in students from other districts, what about something on the higher end, like I believe the horseman is a high achieving, so gifted program or something along those lines where we can draw intuition from other districts if we have the space available. I don't know if we do or not to put something like that in place. So that might be another opportunity to help the students in our district, as well as to bring in other students on a tuition basis. So that's what I had.
Thanks, Randy. I guess for me, along those lines, Randy, you just kind of gave me a thought with some of the feedback we've received on foreign language recently. Are there opportunities there as well, where even if we partner with neighboring towns to host in-person live instruction, physical teacher in the room type of foreign language, whether it's enrichment or entry level or whatever it happens to be, to address some of those concerns as well. So that may be other opportunities to provide additional types of programming in buildings that could utilize the same space, but maybe after hours or something like that, depending on how that could work. I don't know, Heather, how we're doing on time. It is 9:55, so I don't know if there's other slides if we need to wrap, but we'll need to adjourn in less than 5 minutes at this point.
1 minute, 28 seconds at this point to cover this. So, and then there is one slide just to summarize.
Okay. I'd like to move to the summary, Susan. I know you've got your hand up, but you've
I know I have talked a lot. It's just 10 seconds. And I just wanted to say lease versus own, if there's any benefit to switch the current status of any buildings, to consider that. Done.
Thank you. All right, I think seeing no other comments, I think we're good to summarize and wrap up.
All right, so just to summarize those discussions that we just kind of had, and we really appreciate your feedback. We know it's a difficult topic in some ways to consider, but it is helpful for us to guide us a little bit on where we go from here. So the general reactions, we just got back that maybe some further analysis in some areas would be helpful to you. And then the programming and facilities, great information, regarding just some personal experiences with some of the buildings and what you felt was there and maybe what wasn't, as well as what you really believe is off the table for you personally. And then, of course, the revenue and enrollment opportunities, also excellent discussion in that not only do we have maybe the special ed tuition model, but maybe we have some other options for some tuition models and programming that we might be able to pursue, as well as changing the way buildings are funded or bringing in funds, lease versus own sort of idea. I thought that was an excellent idea. So, does anyone have anything that they want to cover on their final takeaways? Lord knows we have enough to digest, I think, on our end.
I mean, I think for me, just, I think we've got to find a way to retain and sustain Ashby as a school, find ways to supplement revenues with other programming, and find ways to garner support from the community to maintain these buildings and actively maintain them, not defer maintenance, so we end up in the point we're at today. So those are, for me, kind of my three big bullets, if you will. Susan? You're muted, Susan. We got 2 minutes.
Guys, we've talked about the differences and opportunities between the 3 elementary schools, but we didn't address the differences and opportunities between the 2 middle schools. And they are very different facilities that offer different opportunities. So I think that Hawthorne Brook is in need of some upgrades to bring up the level of opportunities that the facility offers at Census. So that's an important thing to consider, not just focusing on the middle schools, the elementary schools. Take the tour like Lisa said, and you'll see, and maybe a group tour could be arranged.
Yeah, I'd like to, I mean, if we can, and I'm not going to solve it here with our 60 seconds left, but get a group tour scheduled at each of the buildings at some point, and those that can make would be good.
Yeah, and they are well worth it. I mean, I did them a few years ago, and just seeing the differences between the buildings and understanding the layouts, it's important to see.
All right. I think you're muted, Heather, if you're trying to talk.
I was just going to say, Mike, do you want to go through this real quick? Because I think we're there.
I got 30 seconds. So moving forward for our final steps, we're definitely going to be doing a deeper dive into the what we had termed, most likely not entirely accurately, excess space, but we want to look a lot deeper at how the spaces are being used in Ashby and the other 2 elementary schools. I think Ed and I will be making another tour up there, getting with Brad and the facility people. We've got some updating to do as the new census data comes out and as we get audited numbers from the state and also audited or certified numbers on our enrollment data. And then we're moving on to beginning to develop some of the different alternatives. We got a lot of good ideas from you guys. And it is helpful for us to know what's off the table so that we don't waste our time doing analysis on that and actually look at things that you as a body would actually consider. So all the comments we've gotten have been very, very helpful. And like I mentioned, we're looking at a draft to the super by February. He will share with you for comment and review and a final report in May. But I'll talk with Brad and we'll see about any other opportunities we want to look at for additional input or collecting additional comments. I know we probably ran about 10 seconds over, but Craig?
All right, no, I appreciate that. Anything else from anybody?
Is there an opportunity to provide contact information? I'm one of these people, I know I already babbled a lot, that I'm a processor and I'll think of more things and questions as the next couple of days go by. Is there an opportunity to provide or ask additional questions or provide additional input in the next few days?
I think I think there should be if you want to send those, I would say probably through the superintendent. So we're funneling things through one place. I think that'll just be easier to manage.
I think that would work well for us. If anybody has anything additional they want to add, they can move it through Brad. I mean, the way that we're structured is we're dealing with Brad and he's dealing with the committee. So this was our opportunity to get some good feedback. I think that's a great way to get additional feedback.
Yep. Excellent. All right. I guess Michael, Ed, Heather, Shelley, the team, I really appreciate you putting all this together, running through it with us, getting us to think a little differently about this, and appreciate you answering all of our questions. Look forward to more discussions and trying to work through this, but if no one has anything else, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Again,
All right, Dave,
yes.
Jess,
Yes.
June,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Susan.
No, just kidding. Yes.
Careful. Tom?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So I appreciate it. Everybody hanging on. Appreciate the 100+ people we had in attendance. So thank you all. Have a good night. I'll talk to you soon.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Everybody.